Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. We are 1 week away from the 2024 NFL Draft, and obviously, fantasy football is getting to a fevered pitch. Hello and welcome in to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship right here on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC at Eric Balkman on the X. You know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown and, of course, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour as well. Speaking of the FFPC, Empire Leagues are live now at myffpc.com. So check that out if you want to be part of an Empire Dynasty League. It's pretty cool. You are going to be getting paid out first place, half the pot every single year until some team wins it back-to-back years. Then they win the Empire pot. It is very, very exciting. Something we're just introduced probably about a month or so ago at myffpc.com. The Fantasy Pros Championship is live as well. You can win $1 million there with the FFPC. Right now, those drafts have been going on since February, and they're about to hit their stride coming up after the NFL Draft as well. Don't forget about the other Dynasty Leagues. I think we are down to 9 orphan teams, and we have Dynasty Startups also available at myffpc.com, so check that out there. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch. I want to welcome in our guest co-host tonight. You know him from Yahoo Fantasy Sports, covering damn near everything. Baseball, hockey, football, everything you could put, basketball, everything you could play fantasy in, he covers it. He tweets in crayon, according to his X profile. I don't know about that. I think he's a pretty sharp guy. He is Scott Pianowski. Scott, welcome aboard the HSFF show. Thank you for doing the program tonight. Excited to have you, man.
My pleasure, Eric. Great to be here. And yeah, I mean, if you're not excited this close to the NFL draft, for me, fantasy football draft season really kicks into high gear. Once the draft happens, free agency has come and gone. We'll know where these rookies are standing, and Yahoo Fantasy Football will be open really soon if you want to get your fix in over there. But this is, it's go time, man. This idea in the old days where everybody drafted in August, September, that is such a dinosaur. If you want to be a winner, you got to get these early reps in. And that's why it's so important to have a great conversation today.
I think this is kind of, maybe it's not exciting for you. It's exciting for me because I know you are like knee deep in baseball and hockey and everything right now. So this is kind of a departure where you can get back to fantasy football for a little bit, even just if it's 2 hours on a random Thursday night in April.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm glad. I'm very thankful and grateful to the people I work for at Yahoo who let me do different things, because as much as I love the NFL, I'm glad I don't have to cover the NFL 12 months a year. I'm a huge baseball. You mentioned all the sports I cover. I mean, although certainly football is the overwhelming gorilla in the fantasy space. We all know that, but happy to be doing fantasy baseball. I had a blast covering the March Madness tournaments, both on the men's and women's side. Dabble in hockey. Football's the king, though. I mean, football is the American sport that dominates the landscape, and it's the most fantasy friendly sport because you don't need to know that much about football to like fantasy football. But if you want to get heavy into engagement, you can do it. There's certainly all different kinds of formats. And I love what you guys are doing over there at the FFPC, just all the different scoring, the different hybrids with tight ends and stuff. I mean, there's no wrong way to play fantasy. I don't care if you're in a 4-person league with your family or your people you work with, or if I'm in a 20-team league where, we're drafting absolute breadcrumbs. It doesn't matter to me, but I want to, if I went to a favorite restaurant of mine, I'd want to eat everything on the menu.
Right.
I'm not one of these order the same thing guys. So I'm just thrilled that, I did a couple of baseball pods earlier this week. We're talking today. I have more football stuff down the runway. And as I said, Yahoo Fantasy Football will be open really soon. I can't give the exact date, but it's like they're basically at the finish line. They're just dotting I's and crossing T's. So I hope you have some time for some Yahoo Fantasy Football this year.
Absolutely, for sure. Coming up on tonight's show, we'll go around the NFL, talk about everything that's been going on. We're going to find out where Scott stands on actually a lot of receivers tonight. We'll get into Cortland Sutton, Justin Jefferson. Obviously, I want to talk with you a little bit about that Tennessee Titans backfield as it shapes up for now. I think we will spend an entire segment on just running backs in general. Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane. We'll get into that. And then I do want to close out with a tight end conversation, obviously with the FFPC having tight end premium scoring with 1.5 per catch for receptions for tight ends. It's an important position in the FFPC, and I want to get your thoughts on that as well. So that's going to be the show tonight. We'll lead things off and go west, young man, to Los Angeles, where the Chargers are apparently signing J.K. Dobbins, who was with the Ravens last year, to a 1-year contract. Former Ravens executive Joe Hortiz is the general manager for the Chargers. So obviously he knows a thing or two about J.K. Dobbins. Now, He was the presumptive starter in week 1, having a pretty good game in week 1 last year, and then he tears his Achilles. He's out for the year. Bear in mind, J.K. Dobbins also tore his ACL 3 years ago, and obviously injuries have taken a toll on his career. He was averaging 6 yards per carry as a rookie. He is not doing that anymore. Happens to the best of us. Greg Roman is his former OC. He's in Los Angeles. Gus Edwards is his former teammate in Baltimore. He's also in Los Angeles. And I think this is interesting. And Scott, I don't know if we can take away what Dobbins and Edwards did together in Baltimore and apply it to how they're going to do in Los Angeles. I mean, the Chargers still have Isaiah Spiller out there, who was a day 3 pick, I want to say in 2022. I could be wrong on the about that. But no other real heavy competition. Now, obviously, with the NFL draft coming up next weekend, the Chargers certainly could draft somebody to muddy this backfield even more. But your thoughts on J.K. Dobbins? I know he's had a lot of injuries, but right now he is the presumptive starter for Los Angeles, a team that got rid of Mike Williams, a team that got rid of Keenan Allen and Gerald Everett, and is rolling in with guys like Quentin Johnston, guys like Joshua Palmer on the perimeter. Again, we'll see what they do for pass catchers in the draft. But Dobbins is a starter in Los Angeles right now, Scott. This is mildly intriguing to me.
I think it's really important to get the Chargers right this year. I mean, the fresh coat of paint everywhere, new coach, new backfield, new wide receiver room. They still have Justin Herbert, who's been kind of a fantasy tease, right? I mean, we thought this guy was going to the moon. It used to be the joke of, oh, how did the Dolphins take Tua when they could have had Justin Herbert? And that doesn't look that wrong anymore because the Chargers have been stuck in the mud. I have to believe now, obviously, as you mentioned, there's so much Raven tie in here, and that no surprise that they've added basically Baltimore's backfield from the last couple of years. But Edwards is not a pass catcher. He's on the back nine of his career. And because Dobbins has been so hurt, I have to feel like Jim Harbaugh is going to pound the table and say, I want an early pick on a running back. Now, running backs really don't go in the first round anymore, but I have to figure that some major piece of competition is going to come in here. If I were drafting tomorrow, I would not be proactive on Edwards or Dobbins because I just can't trust them. And I think there's going to be more competition coming in. I mean, significant competition. Every team wants to draft some lottery ticket running back in the 5th or 6th round. But I think the Chargers are going to, day 1, day 2 are going to consider a running back.
Parmar99 hanging out on YouTube right now watching us, and he said Dobbins has missed 43 games in 4 years, which is insane to think about. And if you look at the FFPC ADP Fantasy Mojo of fantasymojo.com, Darren Armani, and anytime we cite FFPC ADP, it's always through his website. The never too early tournaments have closed for the FFPC because they both filled up, but I'm looking at the final ADP that we had for him over the last 2 weeks of the competition. Now, this was prior to Dobbins signing, but he was going as a 17th round pick. He's obviously going to move way up. Gus Edwards was going as a 10th round pick. He's probably going to fall a little bit. But Scott, I think you hit the nail on the head here. The running back that you want to own for the Chargers this year on your fantasy teams, probably not on the roster yet. And that's why we have to walk kind of with kitten's feet here if we're going to be drafting any Chargers running backs, because I think it's going to rapidly change within the next 8 or 9 days. And we'll definitely keep our eyes on that to see what happens, to see what the Chargers do there.
I'll add one more thing about this. The thing with Gus Edwards is I don't think he's capable of being a home run. He's a single. Right. And if you take Gus Edwards in best ball formats and formats where you don't have to set a roster, you're going to fall into those weeks where he scores a touchdown, maybe 2 touchdowns, and maybe tied to 43 rushing yards. And again, almost nothing in the pass game. But there's just no upside with Edwards. Now, there are times where I reject this idea that every one of your picks has to be this hair on fire, reach for the ceiling. I'm going to get guys who are going to go to the moon thing. Sometimes it's okay to sprinkle in a couple of Gus Edwards and thinking, I'm just looking for 650 yards and 6 touchdowns. I will take that. That may be what Gus Edwards is. Maybe he does a little bit more than that. Just understand that there really isn't any ceiling there because he's never going to have a pass game role. And again, just to put a full circle on this, there's major competition coming in here. And Jim Harbaugh had a power. He won. I know J.J. McCarthy's stock has risen a lot in the last few months, but I mean, this team trampled everybody on the ground. And then you try to get chunk plays through play action. They were a run first team, a physical team, a beat you at the line of scrimmage team. And even having Justin Herbert, I think that's the kind of offense they want to build.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to keep in mind, too, like Jim Harbaugh was the head coach of Michigan last year, who had all-world running back Blake Corum on that squad. There's a non-zero chance that the Chargers had Blake Corum and really, like I said, muddy up this backfield to figure out what you're trying to do. Speaking of muddied up backfields, we thought Seattle was confusing, right, with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. But then Howard Balzer reported this week that Rashad Penny visited his old team, the Seattle Seahawks, yesterday. Now, last year, he was in Philadelphia. He only played 3 games. He only got 11 carries for 33 yards. And obviously, it was not a banner year for him. The question here is not necessarily about Penny, because I think he's a fantasy afterthought. The question here is, Scott, what about the Seattle running game? Like, I don't envision them investing any kind of serious, quote unquote, serious draft capital into the position this weekend. Of course, I didn't think they would do it with Zach Charbonnet last year, and then they did that. So who the hell knows, right? But you're looking at Kenneth Walker right now in the FFPC Never Too Early tournaments. He was going off as a mid-5th round pick. Zach Charbonnet wasn't going until the mid-11th round. Does that seem right to you? I mean, I feel like Charbonnet should be going. I don't necessarily think Walker should be going lower, but I do think, this is full PPR for running backs. I feel like Charbonnet should be going higher here. The disparity between Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, I think, was wrong. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable what you're saying. They were frustrated last year with Walker wanting to hit home runs, and they wanted him to be more of a drumbeat guy, get the 3 yards when it's there, get the 4 yards when it's there. He had too many negative runs. And remember, they were actually kind of surprising when they drafted Walker a couple of years ago, because people thought maybe the running back room didn't need that. I was encouraged that Walker's receiving efficiency was better last year, but he's never going to be, a Marshall Faulk, a Tiki Barber, a LaDainian Tomlinson, a Christian McCaffrey. He doesn't have that in him. So I would think the gap between they did soft pedal Charbonnet last year. I think he certainly is going to have a bigger role. With Penny, it's just a case of, okay, we know each other. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's have a steak dinner. Let's talk. Let's see if there's any interest. I'd be surprised if Rashad Penny landed here, if he played a lot. I mean, obviously with the history he has, and nobody's going to trust him. He's just going to be a lottery ticket late in drafts. But the bottom line takeaway, what you pitched, and I'm signing off on, is I think there's going to be a closing of the gap here, and it's going to be a 60-40 type of thing with with a couple of extra carries sprinkled. Everybody uses 3 backs now, but Kenneth Walker is going to be feeling some footsteps from Charbonnet this year.
Let's throw this hypothetical out there. If Walker were to go down, right, and let's say he misses multiple weeks, and maybe not a season-ending thing, but if he misses multiple weeks, when you're setting your lineup, each week, does Charbonnet become like a must start at that point if Kenneth Walker is down? Is he a guy that would be a 3-down player for Seattle, or would they still rotate somebody else in?
It's going to depend on how they fill out the back half of their roster, but I think he could be that guy. And I thought they drafted him. I mean, the comp with him coming out of college was DeMarco Murray, a bigger running back. Sometimes you worry about the pad level and all that stuff, but Seattle's another team. I talked about getting the Chargers right. I mean, what did we do with Seattle where 2 years ago, Geno Smith has this wonderful comeback season. He establishes himself. He gets a big contract. The last year, they lost their offensive line almost as soon as the season started. So it was hard to take this team. I feel like DK Metcalf was just getting personal fouls and doing dumb things almost every week. Still a very talented player. Tyler Lockett, a back 9 guy now we're a little bit nervous about. And even Geno, I mean, I think they've got to accept that they better figure out what their quarterback situation is after Geno Smith. I'm not ready to just kick the guy to the curb, but that 2022 season is going to go down as just one of those flukes that happens every once in a while. So Seattle, man, I don't know what this team is, but Pete Carroll leaving, of course, too. I mean, so there's this team. It's funny how they mirror so much of what's going on with the Chargers, where you're not sure where the offensive line's at. The backfield is going to be muddied. We have a new coaching staff. In the case of the Seahawks, when Carroll was there, it felt like forever. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to draft into this team very proactively. DK drives me crazy. All this talent, and he puts numbers up, but I want somebody who's trying to be as engaged and as focused as he can be on every snap. I feel like that's never going to be him. Charbonnet, oddly enough, I bet when the smoke clears at the end of draft season, I bet Charbonnet will probably be the Seahawk player I roster the most. Now, part of that's a little bit misleading because there'll be draft slots you have where Metcalf doesn't make sense, and you can't take him because you don't want to take him way too early, and then the next pick comes up, he's not there anymore. But I think Charbonnet by default, that's kind of a damning with faint praise, but I think he's going to be the guy that maybe I'm overboard on here, but this is not an offense I'm excited about.
What do you make of, and maybe this is just as simple as, Balky, I'm not drafting JSN at all, but like that was their pick, right? In the first round last year, when they already had Tyler Lockett, they already had DK Metcalf. And oh, by the way, they signed Tyler Lockett. They extended his contract this offseason too. Jackson Smith-Njigba is right now going as wide receiver 44 at the end of the 9th round right now. Does that, here's the thing. Scott, tell me if this makes sense. I don't think that's too rich of a price to pay, but I also don't think it's a price I'm necessarily interested in Smith and Jigba right there.
It's a weird situation because I can, if everybody's healthy here, I can never expect him to be the number one. Not today. I mean, someday he will be, obviously, where they drafted him. And we know the parade of great receivers that Ohio State has had the last few years. And of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be drafted very early in a week from now. And he's seen as maybe the pick of the litter, which is a big statement. You think of how great Chris Olave is, how great Garrett Wilson. Oh, man, I had all the Garrett Wilson last year, and that dream died like 4 snaps into the season. That was so frustrating to watch it. I blame none of it on Garrett Wilson. I am going to double down on Garrett Wilson. I'm just going to keep, I'm like the guy at the blackjack table is like, what's the house limit? I'm just going to keep doubling down. Until
I want you to talk about Seattle, but real quick with Garrett Wilson, like what's changed, right? Like he's still, he has an elite quarterback again this year. Like I guess it's a year older or it's a year further on, but I think like whatever you thought about Garrett Wilson last year, you probably should be thinking about the exact same thing this year. Rodgers is coming back, and they're going to have Mike Williams on this team. They're going to have Garrett Wilson still. Breece Hall is the year recovered from the ACL, which, you'd like to think that this is going to be a big year for him. We'll get to more of him later on in the show. But I feel like if you drafted Garrett Wilson high last year, Scott, you should be doing exactly what you're doing, and that's doubling down on it.
Yes, I totally agree. And any metric you look at, whether you want to go the people who grind the tape or the people who talk about the separation, it was not a Garrett Wilson problem. I don't need to tell anybody how bad the quarterback play was there. But back to JSN, I guess even though I'm a Michigan guy, I love talking about the Ohio State receivers, and tip of the cap to Brian Hartline, who's coaching those guys up and doing a great job. But obviously they have amazing talent coming to that program as well. JSN, it's weird to say a player of JSN's pedigree, I don't view as a ceiling player, but given the construction of their roster right now, he's a floor pick. He's a guy who you take, you said outside the top 40 of receivers right now, you pick him and you hope, okay, I hope he's wide receiver 35 or wide receiver 31. I don't see, unless guys get hurt and Geno Smith magically gets closer to that 2022 level, I don't see a situation where JSN threatens to be wide receiver 20 or wide receiver 18 or something like that. I don't think that's in his reasonable range of outcomes unless everything falls right. And I'm just not going to bet that way.
Yeah. I for best ball, okay, fine. I guess there's probably going to be some weeks where he comes through. But if you're playing in like, Fantasy Pros Championship or anything that you have to set your lineup every single week, like when are you going to know when to start a guy like that unless Lockett's down or unless Metcalf's down? And even if one of those guys is down, there's no guarantee that Smith and Jigba is going to go like 8 for 80 and a touchdown too. I think it's one of those things. He's good for NFL, but for fantasy, maybe not so much. Flipping back to the backfield here, let's talk about Dallas here for a second. And I know it's weird that we're 20 minutes into the show and we're talking about Royce Freeman. No, it is not a lean show tonight. We have plenty to talk about, but I do want to bring up this Royce Freeman news because he has signed with the Dallas Cowboys. Royce Freeman was with the Los Angeles Rams last year. He signs a 1-year deal in Dallas. Now, Scott, this is why I bring this up, and that's why it's so interesting. The Cowboys drafted Deuce Vaughn last year. So he's still on the roster. They re-signed Rico Dowdle this offseason, so he's still there. And then they went out and signed Royce Freeman. Now, there were rumors, and maybe they're still out there, but I don't think they're as prevalent as they were 2 weeks ago, about Ezekiel Elliott coming back to Dallas. I don't think that happens anymore. And why do I not think that? Because I don't see how Dallas can go to week 1 of the 2024 season featuring a backfield of Dowdle, Royce Freeman, and Deuce Vaughn. That just doesn't – it's not going to happen, which to me makes me believe that on day 2, maybe as high as round 2, but for sure by round 3, they are going to find the Cowboys running back that you want to draft. Now, who that is, I don't know. Is it Trey Benson? Is it Jonathan Brooks? I'm not really sure. But the thing is, right now, Rico Dowdle was the only player, the only Cowboys running back that was being drafted by FFPC players as running back 50 at the 13-12. I don't see any reason to draft any Cowboys running back if I'm drafting right now any higher than like round 12 or round 13, because I think the guy who's going to be starting is going to be selected next weekend.
Yeah, well said. They're going to go aggressively with a back, and I don't buy any of the Ezekiel Elliott stuff. As much as, look, Jerry Jones, you can poke a lot of holes in his work as a GM. He's done a great job in some other ways. I mean, they have great facilities. People want to play for Dallas.
Yes.
They take And I say this sadly as a Patriots fan, right? One thing that Robert Kraft is kind of in a down cycle right now. He's losing the divorce with Bill Belichick because he's kind of acting like a jerk to Belichick, and people are like defending the hoodie on this. But Dallas, when they grade out all the facilities, right, all the support stuff, who is the best child care and who gets the best seats for the families at the games and the best workout room and everything. Like Dallas gets like straight A's, and like the Patriots get like straight D minuses. And Jerry does a lot of things right. He is obviously spotty as a GM, as a personnel guy, but they're not bringing Zeke back, and they have no delusions about Dowdle or Vaughn or Freeman or any of these guys. They're all support players. You need multiple backs in today's NFL. They're going to draft a second-round running back. I think maybe they wait till the third round. It's the way the draft is now, where the position, the way the NFL handles running backs, where the position has been devalued. It's still important, but they don't have to do what they did with Zeke Elliott, where they throw all their chips in at the beginning of the draft. They can make a day 2 pick or a day 3 pick and still think that, okay, this can be our 250 touch guy when the season happens. This is another case of, and I know it's easy to say this, the right answer isn't on the roster right now, but this is emphatically the right answer.
Exactly.
The answer is not on the roster right now.
I think that is probably it was down to, like, as far as like dynasty fantasy football goes, it was down to, like, what spot are you watching most closely for day 2? And it was Chargers running back and Cowboys running back. Now I think, especially with the Dobbins signing, and then obviously Jim Harbaugh talking up Gus Edwards, it's emphatically like it has to be the Cowboys running back. Like that is going to be, once that happens, there will be shockwaves going through FFPC ADP after that, because that guy will ascend quite a bit throughout the draft. Keeping it in the backfield, Scott, let's go out earlier this afternoon from Sports Illustrated. There was a report. Andrew Berry, who's the GM of Cleveland, said that Nick Chubb last week started running again, which is good. But Berry said, quote, "This is not to say that he's through the woods or anything, but he's doing everything in his power to return." Now, what's compelling about Nick Chubb, if you're drafting right now, is that this guy came off, this is the second really awful knee injury he's had in his collegiate / professional career, right? This one was really bad. We saw it. It was on national TV. It looked awful. It made me cringe when I saw it. And when I think about it today, it still makes me cringe. Nick Chubb, I would say there's no way that I'm going to be drafting this guy this year. I'm not going to put any kind of, shares within him based on what I saw, based on his age, it usually takes a full year to recover from a normal knee injury, not even considering his. And then I look at his ADP. Scott, he's running back 35 at the 1004. Now, this is a player that if he does come back week 1, he will be the starter. It's not like Cleveland has this uber deep running back room where they can just put in a guy who's going to rush for 1,200 yards, catch 40 balls, and get into the end zone at double-digit times. They don't have that on the roster. Nick Chubb could be that guy. And as much as I want to say I don't want to draft him at all, man, if I can get him the double-digit rounds, now all of a sudden he becomes more appealing to me. Am I right or am I wrong in looking at him as a potential, like, running back 4 in the 10th round, or running back 3, I guess, if I go heavy wide receiver tight end? Like, you look at Nick Chubb in the 10th round, he's never gone this low his entire career.
Yeah, again, you're saying a lot of stuff that lines up with how I see Nick Chubb, one of my all-time favorite players. And again, as a Patriots fan, I can't believe, as much as the Patriots have the ear of the Georgia coaches, they took Sony Michel and not Nick Chubb. That's always driven me crazy. Who knows? Maybe they got bad advice. I don't know. But I'm a huge, and of course, as you said, Chubb had the first blown tire in college. He had to come back from that. There are players in sports who want to maximize. And anybody in the NFL is working hard to some degree. I mean, I get it. You can't make the NFL from your couch and, eating potato chips. But Nick Chubb wants to be the greatest player he can be, and he's going to have a great comeback. It's just, as you said, with these major injuries like this, these knee reconstructions, you get to think about the second year. It's not the first year. Mm-hmm. And yet it's the Cleveland offensive line. I like Kevin Stefanski. I like the infrastructure here. And if you could draft Nick Chubb where you didn't need him, where anything he did was kind of a bonus, when you start talking about him as a running back 4, I'm like, geez, that just would just make me sleep well at night. Look at my roster, like, how's my running back depth chart? I got Nick Chubb. If I get anything from Nick Chubb this year, I'll be thrilled. So I'm going to try to be open-minded to maybe if I can slot him into a running back 4 position, because I just believe in the player. And I think it's one of these things where we're going to be saying like in November, December, Nick Chubb's going to have a huge game. And we're going to say, oh yeah, he wasn't Nick Chubb all year because of just this cycle of these injuries and what the cadence is like. I'm going to get Nick Chubb the following season. I think that's what we're probably going to see. You're going to see a very slow onboarding, and maybe even when he plays, they're really careful with his touches, and the volume drives us a little bit crazy. And he just doesn't look the same player. And then late in that season, we'll be like, oh yeah, Nick Chubb's Nick Chubb again.
Well, we're talking about him as you and I are talking about him as a running back 4. Famous Jay saying he's a great number 3 running back and could be a second half league winner, i.e. Breece Hall. Now that is on the table, but again, he was on the table getting his knee repaired too, which always makes me a little bit skittish about it. So yes, I see the upside. It's clear that the upside is there. However, you have to understand that this could be a 10th round pick that doesn't pay off for you.
Talk about injuries you couldn't unsee, right? As you mentioned, that Monday night game against Pittsburgh. A game of Pittsburgh really did nothing on offense. They made like 2 plays. I think Pickens had 1 big reception, but Deshaun Watson gave the game away. And I know we'll talk about him a little bit later, but it's just crazy that Pittsburgh had no right having a winning record last year, but they did. And a big reason why was that they sold that Monday night game.
I think that, let's go to this same report. Well, I shouldn't say the same report, but Andrew Berry was doing his pre-NFL draft press conference. Mary Kay Cabot, who covers the Browns,
terrific,
asked him about, yes, she's fantastic, asked him about Deshaun Watson. And according to Berry, he said he's, quote, in a pretty good spot. He had shoulder surgery this offseason. He's been throwing passes up to 40 yards. He didn't say that Berry did not say that Watson is going to be ready week 1. Remember, they'd signed Jameis Winston there, too, which I think is a little bit of a hedge. I'm kind of excited for Jameis Winston.
Me too.
As a starting quarterback in Cleveland there this year. But Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have both said that the plan seems to be going correctly as far as Watson's return. And I think there is reason to, maybe there's not reason to believe. I'll bring this up as far as the ADP goes. FFPC drafters were picking him as quarterback 22, Scott. He was going in the 12-10 area of FFPC drafts. So at that point, I've seen what this guy did before. Not willing to trust him as a starting quarterback there, but I'm fully on board with drafting him as my second quarterback in the 12th round. Cleveland also, in addition to the Jameis Winston edition, they traded for Jerry Jeudy this offseason. And the whole band should be back. Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper, David Njoku. I mean, they're all going to be there as well. How are you feeling about Deshaun Watson coming into 2024 when you notice that his ADP is quite a bit further down than it was coming into 2023? Is this a bump worth buying?
I can't unsee that Joe Flacco off the couch was so much better. And I realized Flacco threw some picks and everything, but that Joe Flacco was the person we needed to save the Cleveland passing game, and Watson's confidence was so shot. And I realized the shoulder wasn't right. As far as all the talk up of Stefanski and people under him who are going to say positive things about Watson, that's one of those things. What else are they going to say, right? They've invested. They make the huge trade for Watt. They trade all the stuff to get him. They give him the monster deal. Obviously, Watson has all the baggage off field, didn't play for a long time. He's had trouble regaining his confidence. I think it's entirely plausible that just Deshaun Watson is never a plus quarterback again. And I'm with you. I was really looking forward to seeing Winston play for the Saints the last couple of years, and for different reasons, they didn't want to do it. I get it. And also when he did play for Sean Payton, back when Payton was still running the Saints, they were putting Winston in the straitjacket, making him check down, and you can't throw intercept. I want Jameis Winston hair on fire, 36 touchdowns, 30 picks with the Buccaneers. Winston, I want that guy back in my life. I don't care if it's good for the team. It's good for fantasy. It's just fun. I just want a little bit of helter-skelter Jameis Winston. I don't know if we'll get it, but you mentioned the infrastructure could be good here. Cooper is closing in on his age 30 season, and Njoku was a monster last year, and obviously in FFPC with tight end premium, he's going to be a heavily targeted guy to draft. Man, did I just want to wash my hands of anything nice I said about Jerry Jeudy after last year? I don't know. He needed a change of scenery. He's going to get it. I don't know that. And interesting, another Alabama receiver there. A lot of these guys have not panned out in the last few cycles from that program. I think I'm done drafting Jerry Jeudy, to be quite frank with you. But I can't draft. And I realize if you're going to try to make safe picks, the whole draft not going to work out. But I want my second quarterback to have a little bit of a floor. I feel like right now Deshaun Watson doesn't have any kind of a floor, even believing in Stefanski. And this is a better than average receiver group if that Njoku breakout was even 70 or 80% real. And I think it was. But I'm not. Deshaun Watson's going to be I'm going to be either low on Watson or maybe even completely out on Watson. I need a show me season, or at least a show me a couple of games. And if it means I didn't get him and other people are beating me with Deshaun Watson, I can live with that.
I'm looking at Famous Jay is posting in here preferring Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, and Baker Mayfield. Mayfield is basically going just a handful of picks ahead of Watson. Rodgers is going about a half round ahead of him. But Derek Carr is going like 2 full rounds behind Deshaun Watson. You're also looking at guys like Drake May, Will Levis, who should have starting jobs this year. We mentioned Geno Smith. He's going behind Deshaun Watson as well. Russell Wilson, if you want to go down that road, you could do that as well. Gardner Minshew, if he is still going to be the quarterback in Las Vegas, or if they draft somebody, we'll see there. The other thing that I want to touch on, and I'm going to kind of give you the floor and take this however you want to take it. But the Texans and Bills hooked up on a pretty significant trade a couple of weeks ago, sending Stephon Diggs, the Bills sending Stephon Diggs to Houston. CJ Stroud actually said that he was excited when he found out that Houston got Stephon Diggs. Quote, he adds a ton of value to that room, a lot of wisdom that he carries that will spread to the other guys. Diggs had reached out to the Texans players over the past week after he got traded, and the Texans actually took the final 3 years off his contract. So it is a contract season. It is put up or shut up for Stephon Diggs. He is going into his age 31 season. Obviously 2023 was not a great year. Probably Buffalo did not want to, they would not have moved off him if he would have had a Buffalo season last year. He's going to be competing with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Obviously you love this for CJ Stroud. But you look at this from the wide receiver standpoint, and I'll bring up the ADPs on this, Scott, when we talk about the Houston receivers. And this has shifted since the trade. But you look at Houston's receivers, Nico Collins, wide receiver 14 in the early third. Stephon Diggs only crept up to the early fourth. So he's about a full round behind Nico Collins as wide receiver 21. And then Tank Dell about a round and a half later at the end of the 5th round. So you have 3 receivers for the same team that are going in the first 6 rounds of the draft. I got to tell you, I don't see all 3 of those guys returning draft value based on that ADP. Like, 1 is going to be a bust, maybe 2. When you look at that new look Houston wide receiver room, is there an easy fade for you? Is there an easy target for you among Diggs, Collins, and Dell?
I think Diggs is one of those situations where he's really good for the team, but I don't like him for fantasy. Age 31 season, as you said, changing teams. And there's so much talent here. Dell and Collins were big smashes last year. Dalton Schultz and Stroud had chemistry. They added Mixon, who's going to get a share of the offense too. And in a time where all these older running backs, right, a bunch of them changed teams, and we're all asking, is there like one great Mixon season left? Is there one great Derrick Henry season left? Is there a great Eckler season left? I know we'll talk about some of those guys later, but it's just so funny how often you're asking yourself that question. But no, on the bright side, look, Diggs, it went south for Diggs in Minnesota. And this is just one of these guys, like, the serial dater who needs to break up with somebody and then be happy in a new relationship. He went to Buffalo and he was fantastic and he was happy. And then we saw all last spring that this looked like they were maybe on the precipice of breaking up last year. They got through it. Diggs was terrific for 2 months. He was really bad for 2 months. And so I don't think anybody was surprised when Buffalo moved on. But the problem is when you're 31 is you have all the – Kevin McHale talked about this like in the NBA, where you come up when you're young and you have unbelievable athleticism and energy. You don't really know what you're doing. And then you're in the middle of your career where the experience kicks in, but you still have all the energy and everything. And then at the end of your career, you know every angle there is, but your body can't do all the stuff you needed to do. And I think Diggs is getting close. I don't want to make Diggs out to be like he's 45 or something, but I think he's set up to be a player you're going to take a fantasy loss on. He's the one I'm least likely to draft in a Houston offense that we're all legitimately excited about.
Yeah, I think it's more, and I'm kind of with you. Like, if there's one guy, I think I'm paying the premium on Nico Collins, and I'll buy the dip right now, the Diggs dip, for lack of a better term.
I love it.
Like, that guy was going in the mid-second. Now you can almost get him in the mid-third, a full round drop. That just doesn't happen. Permar99 says, Stephon Diggs on a 1-year deal. He's getting the ball no matter what. Well, he is if CJ Stroud decides to throw it to him. We'll see if that happens. And then Permar99 also saying that, says Dell's injury is actually a little bit similar to Tony Pollard's. Tony Pollard, a guy who said that he didn't even feel right or fully right until December of last year too. So that's something to be concerning ourselves.
I want to say, by the way, you get the best engagement, man. Your listeners are sharp. They're with it. They're engaged. I mean, you could have these guys on as guests.
Right, yes.
I mean, I just want to give a golf clap to these guys for
absolutely,
because it adds to the conversation. When you have engaged readers who play as hard and take it as seriously and as passionately as we do, it just makes the show better.
So Scott says, keep it coming. Keep the comments coming here tonight because we got another hour and 24 minutes to go. The last thing I'll bring up here, you mentioned the Kevin McHale. The comment I always think of, I think it was Jimmy Connors said this, where he had a super long tennis career. And I think he said the problem with experience is by the time you get it, you're too damn old to do anything with it, which is sort of, that's the case. It's true of everything, like baseball, basketball, football, hockey, like every single sport that is the case. And it's just that little sweet spot that you're looking for.
Do yourself a favor. I know everybody out there has seen Rounders. Okay. And you've watched the show Billions. Brian Koppelman was a co-writer of Rounders. He's a showrunner for Billions, and he did a 30 for 30 on Jimmy Connors on the amazing run. I think Connors was 39 years old when he made a deep run in the U.S. Open in 1991, I want to say the year was. And I was never a Connors fan. It's called Give the People What They Want. It's a fabulous documentary, and it's one of the 30. All the 30 for 30s are good. I don't need to tell you that. Yeah. But I think it's one that's been maybe just a little bit under the radar because some of the other ones are just higher profile. But it's, even if you're not a tennis fan, I think if you're not a Connors fan, I always rooted against Jimmy Connors. I thought the guy was the biggest, jackass on the planet when he was playing. But can I say that? But it's a tremendous documentary, and Brian Koppelman doesn't do anything but great work. So if you like Koppelman's work, or if you're just looking for a new documentary you haven't seen, give the Jimmy Connors documentary a spin.
If you like Scott Pianowski's work, we're in for a treat because we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to find out where Scott stands on certain players. Rashee Rice, after everything that's going on off the field. Devontae Smith, he just got paid. Where do you stand on Devontae Smith? Maybe where do you stand on A.J. Brown is a better question. We'll get into that and much more. He's Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
The thing with Dynasty is that it's so hard to get a good league going. Like, it's very difficult to get all these friends that are going to be paying attention, or they're going to stick with it, and they're not going to say, "Oh, I don't want to play anymore. My team stinks. Find somebody else next year." And then you're collecting dues, and then you're getting in arguments, and you're arguing with people on Twitter about dues. Like, we've seen too much of that going on. So it's very difficult. And what happens is you find 5 or 6 good people that want to play, and then you don't have enough people, and you fill the league with a bunch of weirdos. So what I like doing, honestly, at this stage is if I'm going to play Dynasty, I want to play on a nice, clean, serious, professional site, and I go to FFPC to play, right? FFPC has never had a league fold. Eric Balkman over there told me that. He's like, if somebody has to leave a league, we just fill it. So your option is you can go and do a startup, and like Jack said in the chat, you start it, and then you go and you figure out who you're going to take from the top down. And if you want to do a long rebuild, or a long-term team, or if you want to try and win right away and get a bunch of vets, you can do that. Or you can adopt an orphan team, and with that you go out and somebody quit, and that's so much fun because then you take their team and you have all these guys that you like, but then you have all of these guys that they had that you don't like, and that's actually way more fun because then you can trade all those guys, and it's so much fun to trade. Like when I go to orphan teams, I used to say, I'm not going to take this team because all the players, I don't like them. I only want players I do like, but I've realized that it's actually more fun to take the teams that have a couple guys you really like and a couple guys that everyone else likes that you don't like, and then trade them. Like go and grab an orphan team like Gabe Davis and then trade him to some Gabe Davis guy. So go do that now. Use you can use the QR code here or a link in the description, or go to myffpc.com. Just make sure you use promo code COOP when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And that's another thing. When you make a league with your friends, Coop isn't giving you $25, right? You have to pay the full dues. This time you get a little discount. So yeah, go over there. And also for you maniacs out there, they do have high stakes leagues. So these leagues, if you want, you can go big time. I know some of the redraft leagues, we announced on this channel a redraft league that 10K buy-in. I'm not sure the dynasty ones go that high, but they go into the thousands. So if you want to take this real seriously and get crazy with it, do it. That's the place to do it. myffpc.com, promo code COOP, baby. Go get set up.
If you are looking for some dynasty action, check out myffpc.com, your home for dynasty fantasy football. There's, like I said, as of about an hour ago, we had 9 orphan teams left this year that still need homes for 2024. And we got plenty of startups there, starting at $100 and going up to, I believe, $5,000. So check that out at myffpc.com if you're looking for some dynasty teams. I'm being joined tonight here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy Sports. Scott, I know you have done the On the Couch show with Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys for years, and it wasn't your most recent appearance, but it was several years ago, and he asked you about your ex avatar, as it were, Jason Schwartzman's character from Rushmore, Max, and I forget his last name in that. But I love that movie. I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. I'm curious why years later it's still the Jason Schwartzman character from Rushmore. You must really love that film.
I do. Well, I guess we have an hour and 20 minutes left. So you run the risk of us not talking any more football because I'm going to still talk about Wes Anderson and Rushmore. Yeah, that scene, the Avatar, and also you're so right about. I haven't been on Sig's show in a while, but it's On the Couch is terrific, and Football Guys, just everything Joe Bryant's doing over there. I have much respect for all those guys. So hat tip to Joe, hat tip to Sigmund and everybody else over there doing great work. Even though I am a big Wes Anderson fan, I would say Alexander Payne's probably my favorite director, but Wes Anderson's near the top of it. But I view Rushmore as vastly superior to everything else he's done. It's a movie about people who are redeemable. That particular scene where the Avatar is drawn from is when Bill Murray, who's going through a divorce and in a deep depression, is having this little duel with Schwartzman's character, Max Fisher. And Max has just got a little pipeline of bees coming into Bloom's hotel room, and he's walking away, and he's in the elevator. He's got the beekeeper box there, and they go to the slow-mo shot, and there's he's just about to walk out of the elevator, and Schwartzman is chewing gum, and he took the piece of gum out of his mouth and he stuck it on the wall, which was an improvised part. It wasn't in the script. He just felt it, went with it, and Wes Anderson loved it, so he left it in. I love knowing little inside football stuff like that. But it's a movie with unbelievable music. It's all British invasion, and it's quirky. It's a movie about whiskey. It's a movie about crayons. It's a movie about, there's some real angels in that movie. Margaret Yang's an angel. Max Fisher's dad Bird is an angel. And there's some real jerks. Bill Murray's character is an unequivocal jerk, and so is Max. But I think at the end of the movie, we have hope for these people, and they can be redeemed. They can be saved. So watch that movie it's so, the way it's constructed, the music could not be better. Just when Bloom is depressed and they're playing the Kinks, and he's throwing the golf balls in the pool, and his wife is playing kissy cake right in front of him with somebody else and just flaunting it in his face, and he could not be more miserable. And yet you leave the movie feeling optimistic. So bravo, Wes Anderson. Even though Owen Wilson isn't in that movie, he was a co-writer. He did get involved in the next Wes Anderson project as the great Eli Cash, and I've always been a huge Owen Wilson fan. But if you like quirky, if you like offbeat, if you like great music, I don't think you can do any better than Rushmore.
You know what's funny about Rushmore is that wasn't Wes Anderson's first movie, but it was the first Wes Anderson movie I saw. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like the subtlety and one of the other things that's great about it, I like how he shoots his movies like as if they're plays, right? Because you just don't get that from anywhere else. The other thing too is there's so much subtlety. It requires active viewing. You can't passively watch a movie like that and really get like all the little non-verbal cues of what these characters are going through. And so I saw that, and I saw the trailer for it. And what hooked me was when Bill Murray was on the phone, I think with Max, when Max was at the public school, and he walks up on those kids playing basketball in the park or whatever.
Love it.
And he doesn't even miss a beat. He's still on the phone, and he walks up and blocks that kid's shot. And they showed that in the trailer. I'm like, all right, I don't know what this movie exactly is, but I'm seeing it just for that. And so I watched it, and it was great. I mean, it's like, I would say, like, Bottle Rocket was good. Royal Tenenbaums was good. I'm trying to think of the other ones that I'm forgetting here. Darjeeling Limited was okay. But like none of them, like Rushmore was the best of all of them, like that. And to me, that's what was so depressing is I always kept watching. Oh, the other one with Ray Fiennes, with the kid who played
the hotel movie, the Hotel Budapest.
Movie,
yep.
Grand Budapest Hotel. Yeah.
Yep.
That was also pretty good. And like for all of them, I think Rushmore is the most rewatchable of all of them. And every time I watch a Wes Anderson movie, I keep waiting for him to recreate the magic that I felt when I watched that. And it just hasn't happened and probably never will. And that's
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I feel like that's exactly, and I mean exactly how I feel, where he made this one A+ home run movie, and then it's like the player who has the one MVP season that stands out apart from every other season he's had, where he's been a good player or something like that. And Rushmore, when it came out, I feel like they made a movie for me. This movie speaks to me.
Yeah.
And Tenenbaums is a good movie, and Bottle Rocket is a really good first movie. You can see all the promise there, and the Wilson brothers are in it, and Life Aquatic's a good movie.
I forgot. I love Life Aquatic. That is the closest it's been. Like I will rewatch that movie too. That was a really good flick.
I need to rewatch Moonrise Kingdom, which I liked. I thought it was cute. I thought it had a lot of heart. But Rushmore is it's just so much quirkiness to it. I don't have it set up on my wall anymore, but I had the Criterion edition of Rushmore, and in it, there's a map of all the different places you go in Rushmore and different things that happen. And there's a map of this in the Criterion package, and somebody had framed it for me, and it was prized in my wall in my office. And then they wanted me to set up a backdrop, and I'm fine with that. So it's actually in my office on the floor right now. I haven't figured out another place to put it, but it's just, and I guess to anybody who's listening, who's like, oh, Rushmore, I hated that. That's one of those movies you either love it or you don't. You either get it or you don't. And it's okay. There's stuff I don't get, I understand it, but that's just a movie that I feel like somebody went in my head and understood all the quirkiness that makes me me and made a movie for me. And that movie is Rushmore.
That's awesome. It's a great flick. And I will rewatch it anytime I come across it on any, movie channels or anything like that. It's a good one. Okay. We are losing the audience right now. So yes. I'm going, well, maybe we're not, maybe they're enjoying this. I don't know.
Well, you know what? I sometimes I fall into that Dennis Miller problem where I'd rather connect with like the right three people than like make everybody happy.
I get it. Let's talk about Rashee Rice here, because the stuff that's been going on with him in the Chiefs, off the field has been really interesting. And I will use interesting to be polite to everybody involved here. You look at where he is going right now. He has fallen, Scott, but maybe not fallen to a level that he should be going at, or maybe you believe that this, the legal aspect is not going to affect him as much as a lot of people think it will. Wide receiver 23 right now. He's going at the 410 in draft. So basically the end of the fourth round. Now, bear in mind that this guy, I would say when we started drafts at the FFPC in January, he was like a borderline first or second round pick. Like he was going right on the turn. So he has fallen quite a bit, but I'm surprised, quite frankly, he hasn't fallen more. Like he's at the 410 right now. This is DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Smith territory. Where do you stand on Rashee Rice at this moment in time?
Yeah, all the players you just mentioned, I would prefer all of them to Rice. I did, like a lot of people, I was in on Rice early last year. We had to wait out the Chiefs to kind of come around to Rice and trust him and give him circle of trust snaps, give him circle of trust targets. He was there by the end of the season, was obviously a very important part of that offense as they made the run to the title. But still, even though I'm nervous to draft Travis Kelce into an age 35 season, and I know he's on the script for later, Kelce's there, Hollywood Brown's there. Even if Rice had a totally clean offseason, you could tell yourself a story where he could be the third most impactful receiver on this roster. And now he's going to deal with all this off-field stuff. I do respect that he's taken accountability for what he's done. Although it sounds like he's made a really big mistake with what's reported to have happened. And I don't want to speak too much about an ongoing investigation and everything. I also say another football person I love is Drew Davenport, who does unbelievable. If you don't follow Drew Davenport, follow him right now. When I want to try to figure out what's going on in the legal system, we've seen the way the NFL operates. Usually they err on the side of letting things play out. A lot of times discipline can be pushed back half a season, a full season before the final rendering comes down. So I think Rice is going to be able to play. I'm not worried about that, but I mean, how prepared will he be? How mentally prepared will he be? What is the Brown? And I know Brown's a totally different receiver, runs different routes. I'm going to ask him to do different things, but it's still another mouth to feed. Right now, I have a foot and a half out on Rashee Rice.
I think that, to mention some of those other guys that are going there, it's easy for me to pass on Rice, because I do think that he will fall even further. So, and
Me too.
If I'm drafting in April, if I'm drafting, in early May after the draft or whatever, it's like, okay, do I want to get my Rashee Rice shares now? Probably not. When I think he's going to fall further, that's at the point I want to grab him because he hasn't fallen further enough yet. Okay, Devontae Smith here, Scott, is interesting, and we can open this up to sort of just Eagles receivers in general, because I know there were some whispers about AJ Brown not being happy, and I don't think we know exactly what happened in the locker room between him and Nick Sirianni last year. But you have a situation right now with Devontae Smith being inked to a big-time deal, a 3-year extension, I believe. I want to say like 70-some million. So he got paid, and he is still on the same team. Second option, again, as we are drafting him as, to A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, wide receiver 8 at the 201. Devontae Smith not going to wide receiver 22 at the 408. I'll open this up to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Where do you stand on the Eagles receivers?
Man, what a weird year they had last year. I mean, they were 10-1, and Jalen Hurts was the MVP front runner, and the Eagles were going to be the 1 seed. And by the end of the season, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, they're going to go to Tampa Bay and get croaked," and they did. I mean, that wasn't even a competitive game. And I know a lot of people weren't healthy. Hurts probably among them, maybe A.J. Brown among them. It was not a great year last year for the number 2s. For the people who say, "Oh, yeah, Chase is good, I'll just take the cheaper Higgins," or Waddle is the cheaper guy in Miami, or Devonta Smith is the cheaper guy in Philadelphia. That was basically a losing play last year. You want the target hogs, right? I mean, Devonta Smith is never going to get like the 158 targets last year that AJ Brown did. They're asked to do different things. AJ Brown runs a lot more, those quick hitches, and he's just so hard to cover because he's a physical freak and everything. And it's just so nice to see him on the Eagles, even the way it ended last year. We always felt that AJ Brown was underutilized in Tennessee, and then he finally goes to an offense that was willing to pour it on. And for last year, 6 or 8 weeks, AJ Brown was just an automatic, like 7 for 147 and a touchdown every week. Sometimes he got 2. He was unstoppable until he wasn't. And then I think a lot of people were hurt here. I think they can. Brown is still age 27 season coming. I still think he's a front 9 guy. I still think we probably haven't seen his best season yet. I think they'll figure everything out. There's a need for both of these guys, both these receivers. They do different things. I think it was smart for them to re-sign Smith, who doesn't need to make apologies for anybody. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He can run past anybody. And I think Smith's ADP might make more sense, but let's not miss who's the Jordan here, who's the Pippen. I mean, A.J. Brown is the Jordan.
So does that mean, Scott, that you would be much more likely to draft A.J. Brown this year at the 201 over Devontae Smith at the 408?
If you're giving me a chance to, and I realize 201 is literally the first pick in the second round, but if you're giving me a chance to take A.J. Brown in the second round, I'm going to say thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's move on and talk about another stud wide receiver. He formerly of my Green Bay Packers, now with the Las Vegas Raiders. That is Davante Adams. He was in the news this week, speaking to Tashawn Reed, who is a writer, a scribe, if you will, for The Athletic. Davante Adams said, "This is where I want to be," in talking about Las Vegas. Quote, "If I wanted to be gone, I'd be gone by now." Now, he's another guy, 31 years old. He had a 103, 1144, and 8 touchdown season last year with guys like Aiden O'Connell throwing to him, Jimmy Garoppolo, and stuff like that. Now, he has been a first-team All-Pro in 3 of the last 4 years. The Raiders could still get something for him if Davante Adams wanted to be gone. But it seems like Davante Adams will be in Las Vegas. And I guess some would ask, well, who's the quarterback going to be? Is it going to be Gardner Minshew? Is it going to be Aiden O'Connell? Is it going to be Michael Penix or Bo Nix or somebody like that? And I answer with, look at how bad the quarterback was last year, and he still got over 100 catches. He still got over 1,100 yards, and he got in the end zone 8 times. He is going right now, Scott, for ADP as wide receiver. Oh, I just had it in front of me and now I lost it. Wide receiver 11 at the 212. So he's going at the end of the second round. There are going to be some people that would be nervous about that spot. I'm not really that nervous. I know he's getting up there in age, but I see what he did last year. man, better quarterback play. It's like that might have been the floor for Davante Adams last year. As weird as that sounds, given his performance, I'm on board with him at the end of the second round.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. I do think it's floor. And Adams has always been somebody who wins on the boundary, who wins in space. He's not somebody who runs away from people. I think his game will age really well. And the carnival they had last year, just that banana convention at quarterback was so ugly. And like, I've made a mistake in the past of overrating Gardner Minshew. I'm trying to work on that. As you said, we don't know if it's Minshew. This is certainly a team that's going to consider taking a quarterback, perhaps a first-round quarterback in a draft, of course, dominated by quarterbacks. Davante Adams was put in this earth to score touchdowns. I view, like you do, I view last year as his floor. I think we're probably, maybe he might not get 175 targets again, but he's going to obviously overwhelm the target tree in Las Vegas. I almost said Oakland. He's going to have another 10 touchdown, 11 touchdown season, maybe 1,300 yards. You might get 10 or 15 fewer targets. I think the efficiency will make up for that. I talked about loving A.J. Brown, early in the second round. If you're going to tell me Davante Adams is available late second, early third, and he's getting that age pocket we get nervous about, that's a pick I can make confidently.
I want to go back to the chat. I missed this from Permar99. He had a question. He has Brandon Ayuk and he has Drake London as keepers. In his eyes, and quite frankly, in mine, they're both wide receiver ones. But if Ayuk does get traded, and we kind of don't know what's going to happen on that front there, that would improve his situation. He wants to know our thoughts on that. Yeah, I think it would improve his situation. I have Brandon Ayuk on one of my dynasty teams. I haven't been actively trying to move him because I know what he is on San Francisco, and if he does get moved, it's only going to be better for his fantasy purposes. But Scott, I'll tell you this. I have not gone out and tried to get more shares of Brandon Ayuk. I'm kind of in a wait and see pattern with him right now.
Yeah, I think you have to be. I'm curious, what's the early ADP trend on Ayuk?
Ayuk right now is going off as wide receiver 13 at the 304.
That starts sounding really tasty. Well, you can get Ayuk as your second receiver, and what if he lands in Buffalo? What if he lands on a team? I mean, the problem with San Francisco is not only do you always have to deal with Debo and Kittle and CMC, but the team is set up where there's going to be games where they throw 27 passes.
Yeah.
They're not set up. They don't have to play pinball with people. I mean, I think Brock Purdy is legitimate. I think I don't think there's any reason to doubt it. I think Brock Purdy at minimum, and I realize they're kind of different players, but at minimum, he's like a Kirk Cousins where he's going to be good every year. And I think his best seasons are going to be capable of being Pro Bowl contention, or even last year for a second, and it quickly got squashed. Baltimore smothered them on Monday night, but for a second, Purdy was in the MVP discussion, which I think made sense too. But Ayuk, it's funny because he came into the league and the Niners weren't thrilled with some of his work habits and his ethic and all that. And he totally changed that, became a captain. And they've since then just really gone to the mat saying this guy has become a pro. He's matured the way we wanted to. He takes his craft seriously. But now it's hard for him to not want to feel like he's the best receiver on this team. And maybe he is, but maybe it's Debo. Maybe it's George Kittle, who's just a fabulous player. A guy who, if you ask George Kittle to block 70 times in a row, I think he'd be like, sure, whatever you want me to do. He's just one of those guys. And obviously McCaffrey is on his own stratosphere at running back. So these guys, you can't be a great receiver and not have some of that, I'm the man, I'm better than everybody else. I remember when they asked Jamar Chase about him and Justin Jefferson maybe a year or two ago and who was better. And Jamar Chase kind of shrugged. He's like, yeah, I'm better than Justin. And he wasn't trying to be obnoxious or start a war with his ex-teammate. He just believes that because to be great in the NFL, you kind of have to think that way. And so I think what Brandon Ayuk is trying to do is reasonable. We don't want him to be a cancer. We don't want him to flame people or anything, but you want your receiver to wake up thinking, yes, I'm the best receiver on my team. And if they don't see it that way, I want to be traded to a team that sees it that way. I think that's a feature and not a bug.
I want to, by the way, I totally agree with you. I kind of this gets back to quarterbacks too. Like in the NFL, I always kind of like my quarterbacks or whoever's playing for the team I root for. I kind of want them to be a little bit arrogant. I kind of want them to be a-holes a little bit, not over the top, but you want that in them because I think that makes them better competitors. And when you're a better competitor, you always are playing with that chip and that edge.
Well, how we phrase that now, you throw out the a-hole thing, but what we would say now is he has that dog in him, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I think Brandon Ayuk has that dog in him.
He does indeed. Now, Cortland Sutton is an interesting guy. Does he have that dog in him? I'm not so sure, but I think he might think he does. Tom Pelissero reporting a couple of days ago that Sutton did not report for voluntary OTAs. He's just got $2 million guaranteed on his current deal, and this is coming off a season when he only caught 59 catches, but 10 of them were for touchdowns. He is going to be turning 29 this season. No Jerry Jeudy in Denver. They do have Josh Reynolds they signed, and obviously Marvin Mims from last year as well. But Sutton might just want more guaranteed money. This is incredible. He is going to be working with his 10th starting quarterback in 7 seasons, amazing, which is unbelievable. Now, Sutton is an interesting guy here, too. I don't like to necessarily get into the contract stuff, especially in April, because I think this is a lot of posturing. And Nando DeFino always said these things have a way of working themselves out. And I think that this is going to happen too. Sutton, wide receiver 49 at the 1101. This is an interesting guy to buy there. Technically, he is going off the board as a wide receiver 5. And if I can get Sutton as my wide receiver 5, yeah, I'm going to take advantage of that. How do you feel about Sutton this year? Again, not totally sure who the quarterback is going to be in Denver.
Yeah, I like it. Now, the first thing is people are going to say, well, look at that touchdown rate. That's unsustainable. He's not doing that again. But he was a top 30 receiver last year. You don't have to draft him anywhere near that. And look, I know Sutton and Wilson had a little bit of chemistry this year, but it's not like people are like, oh, Russell Wilson's gone. The Broncos are in trouble. I mean, they basically ran him out of town, right? There are reasons why. I get that we've gotten smarter with touchdown rates, and we understand when somebody has a high touchdown rate on a limited amount of receptions, that set the flags fall, it sets off alarm bells. I get it. But there's also a reason why some guys score touchdowns, because they're great on the boundaries. I can't unsee some of those plays Sutton made, like that great boundary catch he made against Buffalo on Monday night. He was making these plays all year. And whoever they have a quarterback, they're going to design plays at the 10-yard line, at the 5-yard line, at the 15-yard line, which is like, oh, this is Sutton makes a double move and catches a touchdown in the corner in the end zone. That's what the play's going to be called, basically, with a bunch of XYs and ham and cheese sandwich in there for the terminology. But I believe in what I saw from Cortland Sutton, and I love when I can draft a player who can fall off from a good season and still meet or exceed his ADP in value. I think that's a tremendous opportunity. And I know maybe people get nervous because of Stidham. Maybe they'll have a rookie quarterback. Maybe multiple guys will play. I think Sean Payton's always going to be somebody who wants to see what's in the bullpen. He's kind of wired that way, unless he has Drew Brees. There's no Drew Brees here, of course. But I'm in on Cortland Sutton. I think he's set up to be an easy profit.
Yeah, Famous Jay is saying that he likes Sutton at the price as the number 1 wide receiver on the Broncos. Dom Gazzetti chiming in. We have no concern on the quarterback play in Denver. Yes, we have concern on the quarterback play in Denver, but we're also, this is a baseball thing, right? We're buying a proven player coming off. Well, he's coming off a really good year for touchdowns, maybe not reception. So I think there is something to understand about the difference there.
The frame, here's one thing I want people to understand, and this applies to any fantasy sport you play, is that when somebody has a breakout season that people believe in, the ADP goes to the moon. We talked about Garrett Wilson earlier. If Garrett Wilson has a monster season, like he'll be like the 3rd pick in fantasy drafts the following year because people are in on Garrett Wilson. People love Garrett Wilson. When a player has a breakout year that people don't trust, it's almost like the next year they want to hold it against the player. Like, oh, I'm not going to be the Cortland Sutton sucker. Right. I'm not going to fall for that touchdown rate. And then you end up getting him. You don't have to elbow anybody out of the way. You just shrug and say, all right, nobody wants Cortland Sutton. I'll take him.
Yeah.
And then you make then look, I think you'll make a profit on Sutton. I think the worst you'll do if he doesn't get hurt is at least you'll get your money back. And in the pocket that he's going in that round, look at the end of the season. You'll see half of that round will be misses anyway. I think he's actually a floor pick who could still be a guy who gives you a profit. I love players like that.
He's going at the 1102 right now. I bring this up all the time. Longtime FFPC high stakes player, Joe Delzanero, Baker boy. He always said that there's no such thing as a bad draft pick after the 10th round. Mm-hmm. Well, Cortland Sutton's going in the 11th round. You miss on him, who cares? You move on, right? You had 10 picks before that. Mm-hmm. You got 9 picks after that. We're cooking tonight. Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy Sports. Here's what I want to do. There's a few other players I want to hit on to find out where you stand on them, including the Titans backfield. And I will get into Justin Jefferson a little bit because there's 2 warts with him, with the contract and with the quarterback play. We'll get into that as well. And then I also want to talk about backfields with you in 2024. Derrick Henry is now a Baltimore Raven. We touched on Joe Mixon a little bit earlier. Let's get into that. And Bijan Robinson is Arthur Smith free. What does that mean for him for fantasy? Scott Pianowski from Yahoo, Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network rolls on after this. And no, I'm not getting a refill. These guys, Rubio and Dom, all these guys, and it's just ice water, okay? I'm not drinking a hard seltzer. I'm not drinking a Zima or anything like that. I'm going to get a refill of ice water. I suggest you do the same. We'll be back right after this.
If you're not playing Dynasty Fantasy Football right now, where we're still out there doing all sorts of trades and moves, everybody else that does like casual gamers that do redraft, they're done, you know, and they're just kind of speculating or like talking about the draft. We're still playing. Like if you play Dynasty, we play all year. I play over at FFPC. If you want to play there, use promo code COOP, C-O-O-P. We'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more at myffpc.com. And there's two ways to jump in over there. You can either do a startup, in which case you can get Dalton Kincaid way after guys like Sam Laporta and Trey McBride. Brock Bowers, I just saw that the rookie Brock Bowers, even before the draft, they're projecting him to go as like the tight end 2 in these startup drafts. Crazy, right? Like right after Laporta, which is nuts. Like you can get Kincaid, or if you don't want to do a startup, I think this is even more fun. You go out and take over an orphan team, right? So over at FFPC, they never close the leagues down. They just take the teams and if somebody has to leave or whatever, then you can buy in and take that team. So you can go find a team that has Kincaid and a bunch of players you like, and you keep those players, and then you look at all the other players you don't like, and you have the golden opportunity to trade them away. Like it's so much fun to take a team and be like, okay, you know what? Because if you do a startup, you love all the guys already. Like those are your babies. If you do an orphan team, then you can trade away all the guys you don't like, and that's even more fun, honestly. You have the golden, the green light there. So go to myffpc.com, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more, and you'll give you a leg up versus starting your own league. Now you got to chase people down for dues. You got to pay your own money. So go get set up over there.
Hour number 2 of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show is live here on the Better Sports Network. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the HSFF Hour, and of course, the Road of His High Stakes Lowdown, being joined by Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Fantasy Sports tonight. Follow him on the X at Scott_Pianowski. One of the players that I did not get into, well, before I should mention this real quick. I mentioned it at the top of the show. I'll just remind everybody that the FFPC about a month ago introduced Empire Leagues. Empire Dynasty Leagues are dynasty leagues with a large progressive prize pool. It grows annually, and it's only awarded once there is a back-to-back winner. When that happens, the back-to-back champion wins that year's prize pool, the Emperor prize pool. The league disbands, and if you're in the league, you'll get your deposit back as well. It is a win-win-win, as Michael Scott would say. So check that out at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. I have no beer tonight, guys. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody in the YouTube chat. I'm plenty happy drinking my ice water and talking fantasy football with Scott Pianowski. Justin Jefferson, Scott, let's go into him. Justin Jefferson did not report to the first day of voluntary workouts for the Vikings earlier this week. Now, Jefferson has not reached a long-term contract extension with the Vikings yet. Apparently, he's had a lot of great dialogue with Kevin O'Connell. And it remains to be seen what Jefferson's going to do and how he's going to play this until he gets paid. Now, if they reach an agreement, great, he's back. But if he does not get an agreement, maybe he holds out in training camp. Now, this opens up a can of worms because I do believe that they'll figure it out and he'll report, because what recourse does he have other than to play? But we have seen over the course of the last 10 years or so, these players that do hold out until training camp or they show up late or what have you, it doesn't always work out well medically. Sometimes they can tweak something if they're not as far along as they should be. And Justin Jefferson is also dealing with the quarterback situation. No Kirk Cousins. He's in Atlanta. And they signed Sam Darnold. I know they acquired the extra first-round pick. I would think they're going to move up to grab somebody, whether that's Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, or somebody. I don't know. But certainly he could have a rookie pass catcher throwing to him, and it's been reflected in his ADP. Scott, you and I know this. Number one receiver off the board last year was Justin Jefferson. So in many drafts, he was the 101 off the board. Now, this year, not only is he not the 101, 3 receivers have moved ahead of him as far as ADP goes. CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase. Justin Jefferson now going at the 107 on average in FFPC drafts. Is this a spot that you want to be in business with Justin Jefferson? Because there's still some, I don't want to say red flags, but there's still some unanswered questions out there. And we're talking about your fantasy drafts first round pick here. How do you feel about Jefferson? Where do you stand on him?
Yeah, it's going to come down to how good you feel about the quarterback they draft. I don't believe for a second. And I'm open-minded to maybe Sam Darnold can have like that Geno Smith season or something like it at some point in his career. I was curious to see what would have happened if he ever had to play significant time for the Niners last year. That didn't happen. And who knows, maybe he would have fallen on his face. I just think that much like Geno Smith, Sam Darnold went to the Jets, was set up to fail. Everything went wrong. He caught mono for crying out loud. So it just, I think a lot of the timing was bad for Darnold. I'm not willing to, and then he went to Carolina where the setup was almost as bad. So I'm not going to say that he can't play, but Minnesota, that was just, okay, well, you're our placeholder. You stand over here and you're probably going to get beat out by whoever we draft, or you're going to hand the job over to somebody that we draft early in the season, because, you know, now when you draft a quarterback early on, there's none of this apprenticeship stuff. I mean, people play right away. It's just that the game has shifted that way. So if you feel good about Drake May, if you feel good about JJ McCarthy, I mean, who knows? Maybe they make a trade up. Daniels could be in play. There's a lot of quarterbacks. Maybe they wait. They take Bo Nix. We all know it's a very deep quarterback draft with divisive opinions on the quarterbacks, and that's been a big story. You go back to Darnold's class, go back to the year that the Niners threw all their chips in for Trey Lance, who we may never know what Trey Lance is. He almost feels like the Loch Ness Monster at this point. Like he's just like a made up thing that, you know, maybe he's a real player, maybe he's not. But you talked about the guys who are going ahead of him now, and Lamb is tied to, you know, Dak Prescott isn't going to win the MVP probably ever, but he's a very good player. He's a plus quarterback. Tyreek Hill is tied to the Mike McCarthy schemes. He's tied to Tua. That's a really good setup. This is painfully obvious, but your early picks should excite you. And your early picks, when you take a receiver, your early picks should excite you because you really like the quarterback that he's tied to, the offense that he's tied to. I think we're all Kevin O'Connell fans. That's not a problem. I think the contract stuff will get figured out too. But can you make a top 6, top 7 pick and say, yeah, well, it's JJ McCarthy, he's going to be fine. Sam Darnold, he's going to be fine. That makes me nervous. As much as I hate to, a lot of times you just want to bet on the talent figuring itself out, but I can't take a first-round receiver unless I'm in both hands, both feet, all 10 fingers, all 10 toes on his quarterback, and I don't think anybody's going to feel that way about the Vikings in 2024.
Dominic Gazzetti chiming in that his cutoff is after Puka Nacua, so he's taking Amon-Ra St. Brown and Nacua, and then he'll take Jefferson, and then Garrett Wilson after.
You know what? I think that's a wise comment, because if push came to shove, I'm sitting there, and you know, these are big money leagues you're playing in. I can't see Amon-Ra St. Brown having a bad season unless he gets hurt. I can see it going off the rails for Jefferson in a couple of different ways. Now, obviously, Jefferson's peak, we would all think would be better than the Sun Gods, but and Nacua, man, what a story he was last year, and I wish I was in. I think I had a couple of Nacua shares, but for the most part, I felt like I was sitting it out, and then you just watched Sean McVay do it again, right? He takes a guy who wasn't a first-round pick and he makes him uncoverable. And I think the listener, I forget the name of the listener you just mentioned, but I think he makes a great point that you could easily take St. Brown or Nacua before Jefferson, and I think that's a very defendable stance to have.
I think the other thing too, you know, when you talk about the Nacua thing that irritates me is, he was like a FOMO pick for me in some dynasty drafts and redraft. Like, well, if people are right about this guy, I don't want to miss out. And they were right. And then instead of being happy about the few shares I had, Scott, I lamented that I did not draft more of him. Like, well, it's just my fantasy greed. I wanted more and more and more. Why didn't I have more of Puka Nacua? But it definitely makes sense of why you would draft Justin Jefferson.
Talk about hiding in plain sight. That's what Matt Harmon and I were saying early last season, that the Puka Nacua story was there to be seen. It's just maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. And I'm going to take the hit here. I saw all the reasons why it could have been a home run. And was I shoving in a bunch of fab, or was I making that late round pick that some people made before the draft? By and large, I wasn't. So, that red ink goes on my file as well.
You and me both. Like, I should have had more of them. Like, it's one of those things where what was Nacua? 7th round pick, right? Right, Scott? 7th round in the
Fifth,
NFL?
I think it's a little bit earlier, 5th or 6th round.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that. I'll look it
Day
up.
three. He was a day 3 pick. Yep. When have we seen a day 3 wide receiver go to that level to not only have one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time, but one of the greatest wide receiver seasons in recent memory? It's incredible. Like, it's just, that stuff does not happen.
5th round, 177, by the way, but it's a moot point. The bottom line is anybody, I mean, the draft's coming. People are going to pick in the 5th round, around pick 180, and we're not going to be drafting them, in most platforms. It's an unusual situation. But what I misunderstood, it's interesting because I did fade Cooper Kupp. That ended up being right, but I grossly underestimated the ability of Stafford to have a comeback season. Mm-hmm. And not just, we all know Sean McVay is a smart guy, but I thought he seems burnt out. I don't know if he's really his heart is fully in it this year, and no, that was totally wrong. I mean, Sean McVay.
Well, and wasn't there reports that he was mulling retirement, or not retirement, but mulling stepping away from the team? So there was that out there as well. Like, we got to remember everything that was going on back then. I'm upset that I didn't have more of it, but I understand why I wasn't, and I'm at peace with it now. And now we move on. Let's move on to the backfield, specifically in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Now, this is interesting. Nick Foles, who is the new offensive coordinator for the Titans, according to Terry McCormick's report, said the team sees Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears as interchangeable. Mm-hmm. He added that the Titans think it is a 1A and 1B situation where both running backs sound like they're going to get a ton of carries. Now, on the surface, this is like, oh my God, this is really, really bad. I don't want to have to deal with that. However, you look at Pollard and Spears now, where they're going in the never too early drafts. Tony Pollard, running back 26 in the 8th round. Tyjae Spears, running back 32 in the 9th round. I almost think, like, if you're drafting one of these players, you keep them on your roster. I don't know if you necessarily want to start one when the other's healthy. However, if one of them is out, then you understand, like, okay, I'm going to roll with this guy this week, and whether that's Spears, whether that's Pollard, it's a moot point. The question for me is not whether I want these guys. The question for me is, do I want to invest an 8th round pick or a 9th round pick into players like that? And that's what we have to figure out here. Scott, where do you stand on Tony Pollard versus Tyjae Spears?
Yeah, probably leaning towards Spears, but I also want to make the point that because platoons and backfield sharing and committees and all that stuff, whatever header you want to put on it, because it's become so prevalent, and we know that 85-90% of the league will operate like that. There's just, the bell cow is essentially dead with very rare exception. What I'm looking to do and especially when I start getting into my drafts that are in the summer, my July, August drafts, my September drafts, is I'm trying to look at backfield and say, can I reduce this backfield to basically 2 people who get touches, projectable touches every week? When I see 2, I can live with that. It's when you see 3, you flee. The ball's being spread too thin. Also, sometimes you have to ask yourself, does the quarterback have a running component? Is he going to take something off the table too? Because that can muddy up the mix. At least I can tell myself a story where both these guys are going to be projected for double-digit touches every week. Now, it's going to get messy because it's going to be some weeks you play the wrong guy, or some weeks you trust one of these players as a margin call, and the hot hand is the other back. And it's like, okay, I needed Pollard. He got me 37 yards, and Spears got hot. He got 120. That's just going to happen sometimes. It may happen on the flip side. Spears is, 4 years younger, I want to say. Pollard, I know he was probably never healthy last year, but it was hard for me to look past. I almost felt sorry for him, right? I mean, sometimes the Cowboys would get near the goal line. It felt like they just wanted to get Pollard some opportunities because he was having such a washout season for years running behind Ezekiel Elliott. We all knew that Pollard was the upside player. And I get the calculus is a little bit different. One player is built for 20 touches. One player maybe isn't. Bottom line, I'm hoping this backfield can be simplified down to 2 primary players, because at least we can draft them a little bit more confidently. But at the current ADPs, I would have to lean to Spears.
Tony Pollard does turn 27 in a couple of weeks. Tyjae Spears will turn 23 in June. So you're right, 4 years separate them as far as age goes. There's so many people chiming in about the split that's going to be going on. Alex P. Keaton saying 55-45 here. Kev Wheeler, former co-host of the show, 55-45. Dom Gazzetti and Rubio, 68-32, 69-31. Thanks, guys. Always appreciate the input there.
Well, you mentioned Alex P. Keaton. Can we go off on a 25-minute sidebar on
Family Ties?
The grossly underrated Family Ties. And did you know, Eric?
Yeah.
Family Ties trivia, you may know this. Meredith Baxter Birney and Michael Gross played the parents in that show. They were born on the exact same day and year.
Whoa! I did not know that. That is crazy. I actually have a terrestrial radio show in Northeast Wisconsin, and the radio station I work at doesn't have satellite, doesn't have cable. Surprising that there's not more money in local radio. So I watch on the digital transmitter, and I always throw it on the rewind channel when I'm doing my show.
Sure.
And Family Ties is always on the hour before when I'm getting the show ready. So I'm still rewatching like all these great Family Ties episodes over the year. Like, and then it's like Valerie's Family's on after that. Then it's Growing Pains. Who's the Boss?
Yep.
It's fantastic. Like I'm surprised I even know what's going on the show because I'm always watching television. I did not know that about Stephen Gross or Michael Gross and Meredith Baxter Birney. That is crazy.
And Alex P. Keaton, we're talking about being ahead of the curve, right? I think my favorite, or one of my favorite Family Ties episodes is when the parents go out of town and there's a big football game, like a college football game in town, or maybe it's a high school homecoming game or whatever. And Alex wrecks the car. He needs to get some money scurried up. So he decides to let somebody thought the house was a hotel or whatever. And Alex decides, well, maybe I'll let the guy stay here. And it goes overboard. He ends up overbooking the house. And basically he invented like Airbnb or Vrbo right there, right? Alex P. Keaton, decades ahead, right? I mean, we know he was a stock whiz and everything. And there's a great episode where he was making money hand over fist by trading with his father's account for stocks. And then there's like a typhoon in Manila or something, and he lost all his money. But
yeah,
Michael J. Fox was the man. He was just fabulous in the 80s. And even though nobody wants to talk politics, I'm pretty much a liberal at heart, but I don't know how you couldn't love Alex P. Keaton.
He was fantastic. And the acting that he had in the episode, it might have been a two-parter. I can't remember.
I know what you're going with.
Where his friend died.
Yes.
And he was still seeing him, and it was shot really weird where he's kind of like, it's darkness around him and then he's spotlit. Like, that was great acting.
Yep. There's a voiceover. Yeah. It's like, yes. Is his conscience is talking to him or whatever. And yeah, I remember asking about your father. Do you see your father as a weak man? Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, that was fabulous. Also, another side of Michael J. Fox that came out, a movie that I think is really underrated, is he was Jay McInerney wrote a book. I read all the 80s schlocky fiction that was out there. Bret Easton Ellis and Tama Janowitz, didn't like her as much, but Jay McInerney wrote a great book called Bright Lights, Big City. It's a really quick read. If you buy it, you can probably read it in a day. About writer goes to New York City magazine, gets kind of an entry-level job, gets in a little bit over his head, parties a little bit too much. And they made a movie about this Bright Lights, Big City, and Michael J. Fox was in the lead, and his party friend, was wonderfully played by Kiefer Sutherland. And I think Fox shows some real acting. We think of Michael J. Fox as, okay, Back to the Future. It's light, it's airy, it's he's a likable kid, and obviously that's kind of what Family Ties is all about. But I think he shows some decent dramatic chops in that Bright Lights, Big City. And also, if you're a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan, his show, he shows up a few years ago with him and David weren't getting along. Of course, Larry David doesn't get along with anybody, but I thought they handled it as only Curb can, kind of politically incorrectly, but it was a great run as well. And you love the Canadian guys. Michael J. Fox, a big hockey guy, so was Kiefer Sutherland. If you're looking for a great song to download, by the way, Kiefer Sutherland's band does a cover of Honeybee that's out of this world. But
I didn't even know he was in a band.
Much. Well, I'm sure he's got Monsters back behind him too. But their Honeybee cover is really good. It's on Spotify. But shout out to FFPC listener Michael J. Fox, or Alex P. Keaton, APK for making my night. I enjoyed just hearing that name, brought back a flood of good memories.
Well, like the one episode, or I think he was on multiple episodes. Tom Hanks was a guest star.
In fact, Uncle Ned, Uncle Ned, who had a drinking problem. I don't mean to laugh about it, but he had a drinking problem, and he had embezzled a bunch of money from a company, and the angle was that Uncle Ned was like a Robin Hood. He was the good guy, and the company was the bad guy. And Alex was put in that conflict where, I love my uncle, I want to help my uncle, but he's done something wrong. And, and if I'm an accomplice, I could go to jail too. Yeah. Tom Hanks was fabulous. And I wish they had used him more in that show, but before Tom Hanks was Tom Hanks, right? Who knew that he was going to be like at one point, the biggest actor in his generation.
Yeah.
By the way, my favorite actor by far, Philip Seymour Hoffman, but yeah, Tom Hanks is tremendous. Gina Davis had a really nice guest turn in the episode as well, and that show as well. She was a housekeeper who was kind of inadequate, but Alex was in love with her, so he looked past all of her foibles.
Oh yeah, that's right. I do remember.
And then I'll just close with this because I know the producers are probably going crazy saying I didn't want 40 minutes of Family Ties, but sha-la-la-la. Michael J. Fox met his wife, Tracy Pollan, on the show.
That's true.
They dated briefly, and then eventually she left the show. They did get married, and then he ended up with Courtney Cox, was his flame, who went on to, I think Courtney Cox landed on her feet. She joined some show that was on for like 15 years. I forget the name of it. But
I think she made some money off that. Yeah, I don't know. It was before Seinfeld.
For sure. Yes, it was on the NBC. It was on NBC. Maybe it was ER. She's one of the doctors or something. I don't know.
Yeah, she was on ER. I think
Orderly. I think we got that right.
Yeah, her and Jennifer Aniston they performed surgery every Thursday night. It was great. Yeah. Although
I gotta say one thing about Friends. I have to say this. I wasn't really a Friends person. I dated a girl who was really into the show. I always thought Matthew Perry's character was far and away the best character on the show. Although I kind of warmed up to Joey after a while, but then I never could stand Ross. I did not expect the Matthew Perry death to jolt me as much as it did. I was not a Friends person. I thought he was funny, and eventually, like any show, they run out of ideas. It gets a little bit stale and all that. But just the things that everybody who knew Matthew, he was very open about the demons that he had in his life, the things that he battled. He wrote a very telling and open biography disclosing all that stuff.
Well, all the surgeries that he had.
For sure.
Oh my God. It was just incredible.
Yeah. I don't know. That shook me in a way I was not prepared. I don't know. Just a guy who seemed like he was kind of figuring out where he wanted to be in life and what he wanted the second act of his life to be like. And just when that happened, he was taken away. And I don't know. I like to see people, like Dickie Betts died today. He was a great guitarist for the Allman Brothers. He lived to be 80 years old. He lived a full life. I hate to see anybody taken before their time, and I feel like Michael J. Fox. I feel like Matthew Perry was taken before his time.
Yeah, I always thought I was not. My wife was a huge Friends fan. I thought it was all right, but I love Chandler on that show. He was fantastic.
For sure.
I did warm up to Joey until they kind of made him more of a serious sort of character with the love triangle towards the end.
Right.
But yeah, he was, for lack of a better term, he was the Kramer of that show. For sure.
At least he was likable, right? I mean,
very likable.
You would like Joey, and what, how can you not like a guy who's like, hey Joey, what's your favorite food? Sandwiches. Yeah.
I'm ordering pizza. I'm getting the Joey special. 2 pizzas.
2 pizzas, exactly. Okay. Right. Or they go out to buy furniture. They come home with a foosball table. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
All right, let's we got to get back and bring this back to fantasy. Yep. We might go rapid fire on some of this, Scott.
For sure. Love it.
We can cover.
They had a speed round episode in Friends. One of the
they did, yeah, which is one of my favorite episodes where they switch apartments after Ross.
They do, and they said Rachel says her favorite movie is this, Dangerous Liaisons. Rachel's real favorite movie is this, Weekend at Bernie's.
The Austin Eckler.
Yes.
No longer a Charger. He's in Washington. Neither one of these running backs are going super high in Washington this year with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. Eckler's running back 30 at the 8-11. Brian Robinson at the 9-10 as running back 34. Are those guys just like, okay, I got to get a couple of shares of those guys? Or is there one player that you like more than the other at that value, Scott?
Full disclosure, Austin Eckler did a podcast or a show with first Liz Loza, my former Yahoo colleague, and then the last couple of years has been with Matt Harmon. And we've all just grown to love Austin Eckler. He's a really interesting, thoughtful guy. To say nothing against Brian Robinson, and we all love his story, right? I mean, the guy gets shot right before his rookie season is supposed to happen, and the fact that he's carved out a nice NFL career and was a great value last year. So more power to Robinson, but I feel like Eckler has a second act. I don't know if it's going to be a long second act, but I actually like him change. I think he gets a new, fresh start. We know he has pass catching chops. We know he has. I think teams have learned. Eckler's one of the guys who taught teams that it's not about who's the most physical back we have. It's about space. It's about timing. It's about being decisive. And he was such a touchdown scorer in that heyday with the Chargers before everything went wrong last year. I think Austin Eckler, I'm not going to say he's a league winner, but I think Austin Eckler is going to make a nice profit off his ADP this season.
Derrick Henry, now in Baltimore. I was ready to move off him. Well, I've been ready to move off him for years, and then he always just comes through. And now the offensive line, that upgrade that he gets from Tennessee to Baltimore, just the offense in general going to Baltimore. Now I think I'm kind of on board, not only in redraft, but I feel like Derrick Henry's kind of an interesting buy in Dynasty. Running back 9 in redraft in the FFPC at the 211. It's high, but I still think that's not high enough for me to say, okay, I'm out on Henry. He's still interesting to me at the end of the second round.
And even though Lamar Jackson's going to run a lot, they don't scheme rushing touchdowns for Lamar Jackson. I mean, Lamar Jackson could easily have a gaggle of rushing yards and like three or four rushing touchdowns. I didn't think, Eric, we had talked before free agency. I would have thought, yeah, I'm going to sit out Derrick Henry unless he lands in the perfect landing spot. And he just died and went to heaven. He's going to score 13, 14 touchdowns for this Ravens team.
I just look at what Gus Edwards did last year. I'm like,
there you go.
Gus Edwards did that. Think what Derrick Henry can do.
He's going to fall into the end zone.
Right, exactly. Yes. Joe Mixon, 503, the new Houston Texan, the newly extended Houston Texan. 503. Is he going to pay off that ADP this year, Scott?
Only because there's going to be nothing challenge. Kind of like the setup he had in Cincinnati, right? Where he was just unquestioned guy with the touches, the efficiency stats. You have to look away from them because they're just going to depress you. But every week when you're setting your lineup, you're going to be like, yeah, Joe Mixon's getting 18 to 20 touches today on an offense where, how could you not love CJ Stroud? We talked earlier about Diggs and how deep that receiver room is. They have a good tight end. It's amazing how they just fixed that organization in 1 year, getting a couple. You get the coach right, you get the quarterback right. It's amazing how other things fall. And they had drafted well at receiver as well. So it's going to be a case where Mixon's going to be a much better fantasy player than he is a real life player. But again, he's set up. He's already got 11 touchdowns in my mind.
That Houston offense this year is just it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. One of the players, I actually traded him in a dynasty league prior to last season. I'm kind of regretting it now. But Rachaad White avoided all the, for lack of a better term, landmines in the 2023 NFL draft. Chase Edmonds, Sean Tucker still on the roster this year. But Rachaad White, look what he did last year. He's being drafted as running back 12 based on that this year. He's going at, let's see, what was his ADP here? 402 right now as running back 12. Is he going to do it again this year? I mean, if I'm a Rachaad White owner, I'm still very nervous of what's going to happen next weekend in Detroit.
It's one of those things where you have a bet on Rachaad White is a bet on the volume, right? I mean, he averaged 3.6 yards a carry, but he never left the field. He did catch almost all of his targets. And a lot of times we've learned this. Jalen Hurts is one of the quarterbacks who reminds us of this. You have to ask yourself a question. When you have a pass catching back, you have to ask yourself, does this quarterback check down? Does this quarterback throw those passes in rhythm? Is this quarterback good for this receiver workload, receiver floor, receiver projection? And in the case of White, I think it is, but we're always going to have to ding him for the efficiency. He's just not an explosive player, and he's going to need to get there on volume. And I would think Tampa Bay, Chase. Look, I've fallen in love with Chase Edmonds before. It's never worked out. I've long given up that. I feel like Tampa Bay. These two things can be true. They can like Rachaad White, and they can feel like we better get somebody who challenges Rachaad White, who could even step in and supplant Rachaad White. I think they're going to try to do that at the draft.
I think you're right. And I think that he is a player that if it's for redraft right now and going forward, like I am not touching him as the 12th running back off the board. Bijan Robinson, on the other hand, now you want to talk about an expensive price, running back 3 at the 104. Everybody's rejoicing that Arthur Smith is now in Pittsburgh and not in Atlanta. They have Kirk Cousins there. This should be wheels up for this offense, but you are paying a stiff price. If you want Bijan Robinson, you got to take him in the top 4 picks of the draft. Is that a price that you want to be in business with Bijan Robinson? Is he worth that, in your opinion, Scott?
I'm not going to take him above the fold. I remember just how many other alpha talents are here. Kyle Pitts, Drake London. It's kind of funny. We talked earlier a lot about Garrett Wilson, and it's one of those things where it's like, don't hate the player, hate the situation. It wasn't Bijan Robinson's fault. He put a lot of things on tape, which would make you excited. And obviously he came out of Texas, just decorated with what an upside he had. But I'd need to get him in the second half of the second round, or I'm sorry, the second half of the first round. He's not going to the second round, but a below the fold pick. I can't take him 3rd, 4th, 5th overall, which is where I see him landing all over the place. That's a little bit too expensive for me
because of the Cousins, Pitts, London aspect, right? That could just take over games.
There's just And also, Tyler Algier is not a bad player. I mean, Darnell Mooney's not a bad player. I think there's more talent here. I don't think it's going to be like just the Bijan show. That's the problem I have.
And it would be the Breece Hall show. It would be the Christian McCaffrey show, which is, players that are going in that same neighborhood. Something interesting last night in one of the FFPC best ball drafts that we covered live. I want to say it was like a 6-round difference between Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert. And I'm looking at the ADP right now. Devon Achane, running back 8 at the 206. Raheem Mostert at the 711 at running back 24. Now, I like Devon Achane. I have him in a few dynasties. I don't know if I want to take a mid-second round pick and soak it into Achane. I know it's probably good that he's sharing the backfield with Mostert because it should keep his efficiency up and it should keep him healthy-ish. We should, we'll see if that happens. But to me, that price is a little bit too high for me, Scott. What do you think about Devon Achane at the 206?
This is almost like that we talked about Cortland Sutton, where he can give back a lot of what he did last year and still make you a profit. That's how I feel about Raheem Mostert. I know we all are petrified. We see a running back who's into an age 32 season. It's like, it feels like the guy should be retired and, 5 years out of the league. He scored 21 touchdowns last year. And Achane is not, he has a different type of build. There's no reason when you're at the 1 yard line, there's no reason to give Achane the ball. There's no reason to expose him to that. I feel like Achane's set up to disappoint people, and Mostert's set up to. Nobody would expect a 23 touchdown season again. But why can't Raheem Mostert score 10 times? And if he scores 10 times, how are you ever going to get your money back on Achane where he goes? I think Achane is a trap right now.
I think I would agree with that, and I do think that I'd be much more open to drafting Raheem Mostert at the end of the 7th round, which I think a lot of people are not going to be wanting to do because of that. Look what he did last year. He's not going to duplicate that. Well, he doesn't necessarily have to return value at the end of the 7th round, whereas Achane has to do a lot to return mid-second round value. My wife chiming in on the Facebook chat right now. My daughter wants me to give a shout out to one of our cats, Phoebe. I'm shouting out Phoebe. Good night, sweetheart. I have to talk to Scott Pianowski here from Yahoo Sports about Kyron Williams. Now,
Phoebe. So smelly cat. What are they feeding you? And the great thing about that episode is they had one of my all-time rock and roll heroes, Chrissy Hines.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the Pretenders. When I was on the great Al Melchior, You, Me, and an album, where you just go through an album. He said, "What album do you want to do that we haven't done yet?" I said, "Let's do the first Pretenders album," which is just an absolute kick-ass album. In fact, I'm not going to say that St. Elmo's Fire is a good movie. It's one of those bad rewatch movies. I think the Rewatchables actually did an episode on St. Elmo's Fire. But I love the scene where Judd Nelson and Ali Sheedy are breaking up and they're trying to figure out whose album or whose. And they actually have an argument over the first Pretenders album. So that's how great that album is. It starts with Precious, which is just a song that just grabs you where you probably shouldn't be grabbed. Chrissy Hine is royalty. And I had no idea we'd be talking so much about Friends, but you mentioned Phoebe, you mentioned a cat, it just made me think of Smelly Cat.
I didn't even put that together too, that the cat that she named the cat Phoebe and it's a cat, the Smelly Cat thing. You're exploding my mind tonight. Exploding my mind about Kyron Williams, running back 6 right now. 204 is where he's going. This is Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Devon Achane area. Again, Scott, this is a guy that if I own him in Dynasty or I have him already, I'm kind of paranoid of what the Rams might do on draft weekend.
I think they may like him more than is commonly held. I would certainly take him over Achane. It's a discussion. I wouldn't take him over Taylor. Barkley's a really hard guy to figure because he's been through a lot. Now he's going to a team where they already have a bunch of touchdowns earmarked for their running quarterback. I think Barkley's one of the hardest calls of the draft season, to be honest with you. If you get Williams in the 2nd round, I realize he will often go in the 1st round. I'd want my first pick to be somebody different, but on the wheel, could he be my second player? Could be early pick in the 2nd round? That will be available to some of you, maybe not most of you. I feel like I trust Williams. Maybe I'm the collapse risk of Williams doesn't concern me as much as it may some other people.
The last running back I want to talk about is not one that's going in the 1st round. It's a guy that's going in the 4th round, and he's kind of a polarizing player. And I know a lot of people in Dynasty have been telling me to ship this guy off and get rid of him because a guy who was not very efficient last year, and that was James Cook. Now he's going, like I said, at the 407 right now. This is after Rachaad White. It's before Isaiah Pacheco. James Cook is running back 13. I have him in a couple of dynasty leagues. I haven't moved him yet, but I also have lowered my expectations a little bit. It's one thing, like if you want to trade James Cook, that's fine. But a lot of the people that play in my league are listening and reading the same people that I am too. So it's difficult to get good value on him. I just look at Buffalo right now having not a whole lot of options on the perimeter. I mean, I know Curtis Samuel is there, but Stephon Diggs is gone. They have Kincaid. Okay, that's good. But I think Cook is going to be a big factor in this Bills offense this year.
I do too. And I also wonder, how long are they going to let Josh Allen score like 15 rushing touchdowns?
Yes.
That's not a good idea. Especially it's one thing if it's the fourth quarter against the Chiefs and you have to have it and it's fourth down, fine. Josh, knock yourself out. But a lot of times he's scoring where it's like, okay, now the Bills go up 30-10. It's like somebody else can score that touchdown. I mean, last year Latavius Murray got 4 of them. I think James Cook is going to walk in the end zone 8 times. He could have a 650-yard pass catching season out of necessity. We know Buffalo is going to make some noise at the wide receiver position on draft day. They have to. They just don't have, as much as we all love Kincaid, who's a hybrid at tight end. The receiver room is not good enough, and they will address that. And they need to really address it because I know Josh Allen is still just into an age 28 season, but you never know how long these windows stay open. So they got to get him a guy right now. But to me, James Cook, when you said his ADP, I thought, yeah, I'll take that as long as I can get it. I have a feeling that's going to rise by a half round when we get into the teeth of the midsummer.
Rubio, I'll chiming in on YouTube. Cook is going too low not to draft him. And I think that, what's interesting is, and I can't remember who was talking about this the other day, but they said, the Bills, they don't have that grinder that can, soak the clock away late, because James Cook, that's just not what he does. Well, if you draft a player like that, like Braylon Allen or something like that, I don't necessarily think that's terrible for James Cook's value, because that's a complementary piece rather than a duplication of skills. A duplication of skills I'd be worried about, but complementary, I think that keeps James Cook on the field for those efficient, for the efficiency aspect, when he's going to do what he needs to do that he does well, and that's going to turn into fantasy points for your team.
I love the way you phrase that.
Yeah.
I love that's what we should always be asking ourselves is, what does this player do that is unique to his offense? And players who are added, what seems superfluous, what is in conflict with each other, and what players can actually work. This is why I love breaking down NFL stuff, or even I'm not like the biggest NBA fan, but I love how you can have a 5-player team that could have more talent, and then another 5-player team that is more cohesive where the pieces fit better.
Mm-hmm.
And that second team might be a better team because of the cohesion, because of the way that things fit in the crannies. And the way you framed that was so good. I wish I had said that myself, because it's that's what we have to do. That's why. And people may say like, well, I don't care about the scouting mumbo jumbo and what pad level somebody runs at, or what, this skill or that skill. We're trying to figure out how the pieces fit. Can people play together? Can people score in concert, or are they in conflict? Does somebody have to score in place of somebody else? Does somebody block somebody from being on the field? These are the things we're always asking ourselves. This is why we care about coordinator changes. This is why we care about quarterback preferences, about how one quarterback may not want to throw to his backs, one other quarterback may want to. One quarterback wants to be in shotgun, one quarterback wants to be under center. This is a little bit nuanced, and I'm not saying this stuff is going to win your league for you, but these are the marginal things that make a difference when you get them right.
It's a matter of like, when you have two, let's say, close to equal talented running backs or whatever, one could work really awesome in a certain offense, but that other one in that offense might be horrible and never see the field because of he doesn't provide that. It's who told me this? Longtime high stakes baseball player told me this, and I forgot who it was. It's going to irritate me. But he said it's all about fitting the pieces of the puzzle together. And I think that while that's more true in like fantasy baseball, especially when you're playing with ratios and everything like that, fantasy football, it's not necessarily, we're just trying to pile up points, right? So you don't have to worry about stuff. We're just all about counting stats. But when it comes to what NFL teams do, how they fit the pieces together, we have to extrapolate what they're trying to do from a coaching standpoint, from a production standpoint, then and in turn exploit that for fantasy purposes, right? And I think that's what we try. That like we podcast, we do shows, we write, we do all this stuff to try to figure that out. Like sometimes it's therapeutic for us and it's cathartic to get that out there, and it helps us understand the stuff we're trying to understand better, and hopefully it helps people too, Scott. And I think that's something that you've been doing for years now, trying to do.
That sounds like something that the Cheese is Good high stakes baseball player would say. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but that was the nickname he played under.
I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, I am too. I apologize. I know one thing I try really hard to do is if I know something, a comment, an angle belongs to somebody, I really want to give the attribution out, and it drives me crazy when I can't think of it. And I know that that's what you're going through right now as well.
Matt Deutsch said, "Is it Dave Potts?" It's not.
Yeah,
David Potts.
That's why I thought it might have been. He's Cheese is good. Okay.
He's Cheese is good. Yeah, and
okay.
he did tell it. He's fantastic. He was not the one who told me this, and I can't remember who it was. If I ever remember, I will let you know. In the meantime, let's talk tight ends here. Yes. I'm going to skip this last break. So take a sip of water, Scott. I'm going to do this Fantasy Alarm read right now. Get the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. You can unlock content for all sports, including annual draft guides, one-on-one expert access in the Discord, analyzing matchups and trends in your leagues with the League Sync. There's a lineup generator that's integrated with fan injections. You're going to get daily rankings, weekly rankings, the waiver wire, ownership percentages, projection stats, and tools. Build better lineups, guaranteed. Everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year, you can get access to it right now. FantasyAlarm.com/lock. That's FantasyAlarm.com/lock. Use code LOCK. That's LOCK. Number one tight end for 2024 as it stands right now. I mean, obviously Brock Bowers, I don't think is going to be a threat to be the number one overall tight end. So clearly the number one tight end in fantasy football in 2024. Hey, already played last year. Who is it? Is it Laporta? Is it Kelsey? Is it somebody else?
I'm a Sam Laporta guy. Maybe it's just easy to tell yourself a story with these Iowa players. And I know another player who had a touchdown rate that might be due for some regression, but it ultimately comes down to, and I know this is all in the rundown as well, everybody has to have a stance about Travis Kelce into an age 35 season. What does that mean? Kelce did amp up his game in the playoffs, but he looked pretty pedestrian in the second half of last season. And maybe it's a case of this year. It's like, okay, we need you for the long haul. We don't want to. It's almost like the Dodgers this year where it's like, okay, let's have everybody throw 130 innings and then you're ready to go in October. I almost wonder if that's kind of what the Travis Kelce plan was last year and what it might be this year, where they don't want to go crazy with him, knowing that they need him at the end of the season. Sam Laporta for me. I don't even hesitate to that. I just need to go young. I need to go a lot younger at that position.
He is being drafted as the tight end one right now in the FFPC, going at the 202. Again, tight end premium, so the tight ends get pushed up. But Sam Laporta is the choice of the FFPC drafters there. Travis Kelce has been the number one tight end for years in the FFPC. I want to get your opinion on specifically to his game. How does his age affect his production? He is going to turn 35 this season. And I feel like we have seen in the NFL, these tight ends age like fine wine, and you can still get really good fantasy production out of them in their mid-30s, sometimes in rare cases in their late 30s. Travis Kelce is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Maybe he is one of those rare cases. I have him in a really important dynasty league. I have not traded him yet. I don't plan on trading him yet. Your thoughts on Travis Kelce's 2024 season, Scott?
Yeah, it's a really tough call because, I mean, he's always going to be 6'5". You know, it's not like he loses, 4 or 5 inches off his height. He's always going to be the biggest kid out there. And so you really can't cover him that well because even when he's covered, it's still an option. He has such great rapport with Mahomes, but only 5 touchdowns last year. The yards per target were a new career low. The yards per reception were a new career low. The target share went down. They bring in Hollywood Brown. They don't, as much as they lean on Kelce, it's not like Mahomes is like, well, I'm just throwing to Kelce no matter what. Even if it's not there, I'm just going to let him make a play. He'll throw to other guys. And he'll even, if he's a very judicious runner as well, I think Mahomes does not get enough credit for running the way I want my quarterback to run. I want a quarterback who can run, who doesn't necessarily make his business running. And that's kind of what Mahomes is. But yeah, a lot of tight ends have aged well. Tony Gonzalez had a great run through his 30s. And granted, it's going to seem unfair. Like I'm going to compare Kelce to the outliers, to the first team.
Is he an outlier? That's my point.
For sure he is. I mean, who is the best tight end of all time? Is it Gonzalez? Is it Rob Gronkowski? Is it Kelce? Kittle is in his 30s now. I think he's going to a Hall of Fame too, although maybe he's not quite to the level of those other guys. Although if I needed
Antonio Gates was another one.
For sure. Antonio Gates, who was very good in his 30s, a guy who wasn't even drafted out of Kent State and, unleashed a million. Oh, did you know this tight end played basketball? Tony Gonzalez was a basketball player at Cal. Gates was a basketball player at Kent State. And I believe his first touchdown in the NFL was caught from Doug Flutie, which was really cool. The Chargers at one point had a quarterback room of Doug Flutie, Phillip Rivers, and Drew Brees, which I would have loved to have just hung out with those guys. And think of how much smarter we'd be hanging around all those dudes. But I'd rather be a year early than a year late. It's not that Kelsey's going to collapse, but there's a better offensive infrastructure this year. We saw the efficiency go down. They're not going to force the ball to him. I think it's also going to be a case. Remember, he didn't play the opening week against Detroit. I think a lot of times when he's like a game time decision, they're going to be like, we need him in January. We need him hopefully in February. Maybe you sit him. Maybe you give him limited snaps. I hate saying this because Travis Kelce is one of the two. He's on the Mount Rushmore tight ends. Let's say it that way. If you're a Gronkowski guy or a Gonzalez guy or a Gates guy, I'm fine with that. But Kelce's at that table. I'm not going to be drafting him proactively in 24.
Well, we talk about, you just mentioned how you want to go young at the position. I look at the players going right after him. Trey McBride at the 209, where Kelsey's going at the 206. Dalton Kincaid is going at the 303, so less than a round later.
And that's going up too. That's just going to keep going up all summer, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Let's talk about McBride. Alex P. Keaton chiming in saying that he thinks Trey McBride is going to be the tight end one. It's an interesting situation with Arizona because as it stands right now, McBride is the main pass catcher there. However, they could take Marvin Harrison Jr. They could trade down and they could get Malik Neighbors too if they wanted to stay in the top 10. What do you think about Trey McBride this season? How do we handle him in drafts? Do we just assume like, okay, regardless if they have Harrison or somebody like that, McBride is still going to have like a top 3 season? What are your thoughts on McBride?
The problem with McBride, and I think APK is right to be excited about McBride, is just everybody is, and it's just turned into helium. I was thinking, okay, I'm ready to take Trey McBride in the 4th round of something like an FFPC, maybe late 3rd round. And he's pushed up a half round or a full round past what I was expecting because everybody's in on this guy. It's just so hard to make and man, we're going to have some tough discussions with Kincaid because it's just, the setup is so great. He obviously flashed in the second half of last year, and now everybody wants to be in on that type of player, and it's just so hard to make profits that way. And I do think, like most people, most of the mocks you'll see have Harrison going to Arizona. He seems like a player who would be impactful right away. Even we talked about as great as the OSU conveyor belt has been, Harrison seems to be a little bit separate than those other guys, which is a big statement when you think of how great Wilson and Olave and JSN and several other players have been. I just wish everybody wasn't in on Trey McBride because when something gets a little bit too trendy and the helium and you have to pay the ADP premium, I usually just say, you know what, I'll just take a value that maybe everybody isn't elbowing each other out of the way for. So even though I think APK and others are very justified to be excited about McBride, I think he's a little bit over his skis at this current ADP.
Yeah, you talk about waiting on a value too. I do think that tight end, I don't know if it goes 12 deep this year, but definitely 9 and maybe 10. So I think you could wait on a value. We'll talk about some of those other players here. Including one that is going as tight end 15 right now because of his injury, and that's TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota. So now Hawkinson tore his ACL last year. He is going in the 9th round right now, Scott. And obviously the same questions we have Justin Jefferson is a question we're asking with Hawkinson. Who's the quarterback going to be? This could be better for Hawkinson because maybe Hawkinson is more of a security blanket than Justin Jefferson would be for a young quarterback, should they choose to go that way. But the biggest question is, God, am I really taking TJ Hawkinson in redraft in a single-digit round, knowing that he's got to recover from an ACL? And even if he comes back, that's no guarantee that he's going to come back to even close to the level of production that we're used to seeing from Hawkinson.
Yeah, I don't want to. He's going to go early enough. You mentioned earlier that somebody had said that there are no bad picks like after the 10th round. I agree on that. Hawkinson's going to go in a digit round, and I just don't want to talk myself into any of my front half picks. So I'll be open to him next year. And he had a great season, man. In some of my heavy PPR formats, he was carrying me. I mean, he had a couple of 10-catch games. He understands space so well, and he certainly had a great chemistry with Cousins. But I'm going to probably sit out TJ Hawkinson this year.
Yeah, it's for redraft. It's real difficult for me to get behind them. Even dynasty. I mean, like, I mean, I guess if you got an IR spot, if they put them on IR, certainly that would help you out. But if they don't, I mean, then you're talking about soaking up a roster spot for Hawkinson too, which is another thing for redraft. You know, like a lot of teams or a lot of leagues don't have that IR spot for redraft. So then, okay, you're going to draft him. You got to keep him on your team, and God knows when he's coming back.
And I always say, don't draft into injuries because injuries are going to find you.
Yes.
Granted, and I know somebody's probably saying, well, what if you last really, really late? Yeah, sure. If the price is ridiculous, I want you to be fluid at the draft table. And if opportunities present themselves, then you adjust and call an audible. That's what real football teams do. But you draft a team, you think, oh, one team's healthy, so I can just stash this guy or that guy. And then 2 weeks go by, and then it's like, oh my God, I got 5 guys hurt. That's what's going on in baseball right now, right? I think I'm not usually a stash guy. I wanted to stash Walker Buehler, a couple other players I wanted to stash. And then like everybody else, I have like 5 pitchers who are hurt right now. I don't have enough room to stash all of them. Yeah. So now I got to either play down, play short and lose the volume game, or cut guys I don't want to cut. Both of those that's like, which poison would you like to drink? It's just not fun.
Yes. I mean, that's totally like, you know, with football too, when you're drafting players, just because, you know, we start the season and we know who's hurt and who's not, there's no guarantee like, okay, the injuries are done. No, they're not done, and they're going to happen, and they're going to happen more and more often once the season starts. So,
and I want to train you on one other thing too. When you hear 3 to 6 weeks, hear the 6, not the 3. Right. Every player's going to tell you they're a superhero. They're going to come back ahead of schedule, and sometimes they do, but usually the higher end of it. And then you get that gap week, right? When they come back, are they on a pitch count? Can we trust them? Do we want to play them? So sometimes you lose an extra week where they're in uniform, but they're not startable. Maybe they're on a Sunday night game, and that screws up all the cadence, or a Monday night game. You don't know what to do. You have to make a choice with imperfect information. In fact, one of my favorite things to do, and it feels a little bit cruel to do it, but when a player gets hurt in season, if you're in a trading league, a lot of times I'll take the temperature on the league and see if somebody will buy in at the high end of the return date. And I'll think, okay, I'll liquidate this asset now. And again, these are people and human beings, and I don't mean to be coy about that or glib about it, because I care. I want everybody to be healthy and be the best they can be. But a lot of times when my star, and it has to be a star. If a lesser player gets hurt, nobody's going to be interested. But you know, like last year, if I had Justin Jefferson in the league, he gets hurt, I might have tried to find the manager who wants to buy in on him coming back quickly and seamlessly, and see if maybe I can get the majority of that Justin Jefferson value back to me. I think a lot of times it's a really smart play.
I think like that seems good in theory, and I've done it before, and maybe I'm just not, I'm expecting too much in return. I haven't been able to seal many of those deals for whatever reason, but I do the same process as you, Scott. Like I think that's just being smart. And I always look at it like, before we get into the dehumanization aspect, I always look at, I'm drafting stats rather than players.
Right.
Like I'm drafting the stats of players, and that's sort of how I rationalize it.
And also I want to say that the angle I presented as a community, both on the analyst side and as the player side, we're a lot smarter and a lot more sophisticated. And it's possible I'm giving you something that was great in 2012 or great in 2009 that maybe doesn't play as well today. My goal, I don't know if I always hit this, but my goal is always to try to do analysis and advice that helps smart players. It helps people in competitive leagues. And when people sometimes will give out advice like, you know, I don't know, Jamar Chase will have 1 catch in opening day, and people say, oh, buy low on Jamar Chase. I'm like, where would that ever work? Who would, if you're in a league where you can do that, good for you. Get all the entry fees up front and start building your trophy case, because you're not going to have to worry about that much. We want to try to give advice that will help people in the smarter leagues. And I'll admit, if the angle I just presented, if that's a little bit dated, or if it wouldn't fly, and a lot of times people just say, not in my league, not in my league. I get it. You got to play to your room. And hopefully, you know, we had a great 2-hour conversation tonight. Hopefully we've given a lot of stuff that and, you know, your listeners are great. They were chiming in with some wonderful complimentary discussions and angles. And I always want to try to help the people win a competitive league. That's always the idea. For anybody who is craving content from Scott Pianowski, who is creating content for you to win your high stakes leagues or what have you, Scott_Pianowski on the X. And then of course, Yahoo Sports. What else? Is there anything else we should be promoting? Those are the main hubs. And I hope you give Yahoo Fantasy a try. I know there's a lot of different great places to play. FFPC should be a part of your fantasy diet. And I'm sure it is if you're listening to this program, but I think Yahoo's a very intuitive interface. The people who put the app together do great work with it. And, I play a lot of different places, which people have to, but Yahoo is my main hub. And if you haven't been there in a while, I hope you give us a chance this year.
Absolutely. And Scott, I did not think we would get into the level of fantasy football as well as St. Elmo's Fire, right? Friends, Family Ties,
yep.
Rushmore, Mother of God. We covered it all. It was truly a pop culture night that happened to have some fantasy football to it as well. We will have to do this again sometime. I'll get you back on. I don't know when, but probably sometime maybe later on in the season, or maybe as a season wrap up. I'd love to do that with you as well. You be good. Thank you so much for everything tonight, Scott.
Eric, it was a blast. Thanks to you and Matt for having me, and can't wait to do some real football drafts, and keep doing what you're doing. You have a great show over here, and I hope people enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. That's Scott Pianowski. I want to say thank you to him. I want to say thank you to Matt Deutsch. We're back at 7 p.m. Programming note, we're not doing a show next Thursday because the NFL draft. So Tuesday, we're going to be back 2 hours starting at 7 o'clock. Legendary Upsides. Stephanie Miller is going to join us for our NFL draft preview show. Check out the Empire Leagues and the Dynasty Leagues over at myffpc.com. The Fantasy Pros Championship is live there as well. Thank you so much for watching. For Scott Pianowski, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. We will talk with you again Tuesday night at 7.